Okay, so as people are coming in, or if anybody else joins us, what I just set up and what I think is how we're going to do it is we have a Google Classroom assignment that has the roll-up key questions and scoring sheet in it. When you click on those, it makes a version just for you. So you're the only ones that'll see your version. And just so you know, in the future, if we do things like this, I can also see your versions, but no one else can. Oh, wait, did it make one for every? Oh, it just made one for everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, even before they like click on it. Interesting.
Yeah.
I assumed they had to like start it or something, but nope. It just.
So we have our own.
No, but it like does them
forums?
at different times. Oh no, these are ones who are people who have opened them. Okay, weird. Okay, yeah. So each person has their own document, which is fine. So that's where you can like do your own notes or play around with them, and no one else can notice or do it. So feel free to put whatever you want in there.
Alright.
And then the in the regular Spectrum folder, there is there are documents in our did we just leave it in mock game design? Yeah, we did. In the mock kickoff folder in mock game design, there are the two initial documents where we'll keep kind of like everyone's answers. So if you pull these ones up, or at least a couple people, you can help edit the main one that everyone can see, so that when we're sharing it, everyone can see it. So, and don't worry about like your copy being perfect. So like if you don't answer some of the questions, it's fine. More of this is just like the list of questions and everything is just to give us an idea of things to be thinking about while we're going through all of the rules. I can do a couple other things because I realized I can like add the rule set to this, which is useful. Let's see how the documents are edited. So I can add the roll-up rule set somewhere, roll-up manual. And then you can just, yeah, so this one just lets you view the file, which is all we want. Okay. Is there anything else we need outside of those two things, or so those three things?
I don't think so.
Okay. Oh, there's a CAD link somewhere, right?
That should be on the manual too.
Yeah, is it yet? I don't think it is.
Mm,
The top one is for Pipefall. I don't think there's one for the old one yet, or for the new
okay,
one.
it's not.
I don't think we ever did it. So there are some things we will still be changing for sure. But we do have an on-shape version of the field. Wait, what? I thought I hit link. What happened to add? Okay. Oh. And this is slightly out of date. There's probably some changes that happened from this on-shape version of the field. But if you want to have the CAD, you can. So things to do right now. So we're going to introduce some stuff in a second, but while we're doing that, if you can read through a lot of these questions, because again, a lot of these are things to be thinking about while we're kind of going over the entire game. The rough concept of what we're planning to do for the next 2 months-ish, right? We're mid-September. This is probably going to hopefully run till beginning to mid-November. Is basically we want to be able to do as much of the design process of a robot that we normally do for a real season while we're all virtual. So ideally, we're going to improve a lot of the all the people who would normally be working on subsystems for our actual competition robot will help us design and do the CAD portion of it and a lot of the strategy and design portion of it virtually for this mock game that we developed that we think has a lot of interesting concepts and things inside of it. Okay, so things to be thinking about. So at the moment, we had 5 people sign up and say they were interested in doing subsystem managing, correct?
Yes.
Kathleen, Felipe, Janet, Grisha,
Mason.
Mason. Thank you. Okay. If anyone else is interested or becomes interested, let us know. There's also going to be other CAD tasks that, especially as we get towards the end, we'll probably have some of our, as more people are learning CAD and things, we'll probably build out some more assignments and things kind of based on this game and wrap some more things around it. Before we get started, are there any questions about kind of what we're doing over the next 2 months? Not necessarily even what we're just doing today. Okay.
Well, I have a question.
Oh yeah, what's up?
Sorry. So people who aren't really super involved with like the design, like if I'm gonna be mostly doing like programming and stuff, am I going to be like where am I gonna like where can I be most
Gotcha.
productive?
Gotcha.
Basically?
So yeah, so there is some, there's at least been some interest from you, Michael, and a few other people who are planning to do programming to at least to write out like what would be the program for this robot. So that's one of the things we'll do. So this will be one of the, as we're getting through more of the coding tutorials. So this probably starts more in like 3 to 4 weeks ish, probably closer to 4. There's some stuff we can be looking at now. So like on the control side, we can be looking at how would we put sensors on the robot, which are things that we'll have to go over in training and stuff, and we can talk about and kind of introduce even before we get to training. But then we will kind of write out a sample program that we wouldn't be able to test as much, right? We can do some of it in the simulator, but we probably won't have it. We won't have real hardware to test it on and be able to like do any of the tuning and stuff that we would normally do on a competition robot. But we can get all the structure laid out. We can test it all in the simulator. So that will all happen, especially once we have more, once we're further along in the controls training with a lot of people.
Okay, cool.
But understanding this part is still really important because you have to know what the robot does to be able to program it.
Yeah, makes sense.
And how you can like help meet the strategy too, because there's a lot of things we can do on the control side to make our robot way more effective on the field.
All right, cool.
Other questions? Okay, so the rough goal of today is to get everyone an understanding of the game. So there are 3 or 4 of us who helped kind of design the field and the rules, and a couple more of us had bits and pieces of it as well. But even I'm not sure I understand everything that's written in the rules because I didn't write the entire manual. That kind of a bunch of us did. So it's important that we all have a good understanding of what's actually there, and kind of mimic a lot of what we do on the real kickoff day when we're all taking in the game for the first time. This is a little bit trickier because we don't have a nice fancy game animation that kind of summarizes things for us. And we also have some people with some preconceived notions of how the game could be played because we did help design it. So at some points, definitely the people who are less familiar with the game push back on us on things if we say something and be like, wait, where is that in the rule? Or like, where does it actually say that? Because either one, we can still edit some things in the rules because the rule book isn't fully ready to be published to everyone yet. Like eventually this will go out to other teams. But so part of the thing today is we should definitely figure out where there's misunderstanding, where are there things we can add to the rules. We're missing a lot of images, so we'll have the CAD model of the field. But there's times where we can take screenshots today and add them back into the manual and things. So really our goal is just to have everyone get a good understanding of what the game is, and then also start talking a little bit about strategy. And then we'll have more time to talk about kind of what the robot looks like and things more probably coming next week. Like we're not going to jump in and start CADing everything immediately. Like, that's not useful. Friday will be our next like intermediate CAD session. We're going to talk a lot about like using sketches to learn and to like kind of help solve problems and investigate problems, which is a lot of what we do during that first week of kickoff normally. So after today, the next big day when we'll be pushing on this, like we'll ideally have people thinking about it as much as we can throughout the week. Friday will be the next day that we go in and start like moving forward with kind of the robot concepts and things. Okay, so while we're going through the introduction to the game before we even get into the manual, be thinking about answers to some of these questions. Does anyone have any questions before we introduce the game? Okay, so our mock game for this season is Roll Up. It is a completely fictional game, right? We do not plan to play this game in any real sense. At the moment, if we have time, if there's ways to do things in person, we may eventually build some sort of prototypes or things with it. But the full official field will never be built, as far as we know. We have no plans to do so. The game Roll Up is a standard FRC game, so a lot of things we know that happen in FRC games. It is 3-on-3. There are 3 red robots and 3 blue robots. It is played on carpet. We didn't do anything weird like change the surface or anything. But we did kind of expand out of what a normal FRC game is. As you can kind of see from this, there are these what are called quarter pipes. And they are the focal point of most of the things that happen in the game. In addition to the quarter pipes, just so you know, there's this middle section called the speed bump that has ramps going up and down each side and a small platform. So it's a little bit harder to race across the middle of the field. Okay, so what do the goals or the quarter pipes look like? So the quarter pipes, where kind of all the action happens. The animation doesn't have it, so then I need to do it here. So before we get into that, kind of what are we actually using, because this would normally be in the animation kind of quickly, is the game objects. So our game objects are small balls, which are 2017 fuel, and big balls, which are 2016 boulders. A small ball is 5 inches, and a big ball is 10 inches. So they're 2 pretty dramatically different sized game pieces. Okay, so the object of Roll Up is to score points by rolling the balls up these ramps. And so you can kind of think of it like a skee ball game. You get points whether the balls go into the lower goal, which is where it kind of like misses everything and comes down into this portion of the goal. There are certain points, which we'll get to in a little bit. There are points for balls going into the outer ring, which is this first goal kind of in blue. There are points if the balls go into the inner ring, which is this back ring on the black plate back here, that ring. And there are points if the ball goes into the top ring. So there's 4 different places balls can go, and they all get different points based on when they go into those goals. The end of the match, since we're already here, we can talk about that, is to have robots try to either be low parked, which is where some part of the robot is touching the carpet and some part of the robot is touching the ramp. So if they're just kind of like drive up here, you get a certain amount of points for being low parked. If you're high parked, it's where your entire robot is being supported by the ramp, but your bumpers are below this white line. And if you are climbed, it's where your entire bumpers are above this white line. So you have these 2 climbing bars, the yellow and green bar, that you can use to get your bumpers above this white line. Or any other way you can do that. Okay. What else are we missing? Start of the match, right? So we kind of can go through the flow of a match. So at the start of the match, each alliance is on their goal side of the field. So this is the blue goal in this corner. This is the red goal in this corner. So the red robots are on the left side of the field that we're looking at. The blue robots are on the right side of the field. Each robot has to start with its bumpers at least intersecting the white starting line or initiation line, right? I think that's the right name. And then each alliance must have at least 1 robot whose bumpers are in each of the 3 zones. So there's a red zone, which is like this red tape line back to the wall. There's a neutral zone, which is between the blue and red lines. And there's a blue zone, which is the blue to the tape line. So each robot's bumpers must be crossing the initiation line somehow. And there must be some amount of robot bumper in each of the 3 zones. So that's true for both sides. general starting things that would be in the video, the robots each start with can start with up to, or start with one big ball that is either in their robot or touching their robot, and start with up to 10 of the small balls. That's correct, right?
Yes,
Sure?
I believe so.
And then that's for both alliances. And then there are 12 big balls located atop the speed bump, equally spaced. So there's basically like 4 on this red portion, 4 on the white portion, and 4 on the blue portion. Autonomous is 15 seconds with drivers not touching the controls. And the goal of autonomous is basically to have your robot score balls. Points are roughly doubled, but there's some special point things that we'll get to when we get through the manual in autonomous mode. What are we missing? There are vision targets at the front of the goals. This white section here is basically a similar vision target to what was in Infinite Recharge, kind of around the goal, just like retroreflective tape. This white target we'll get to in the manual, but this is a special type of vision tag that autonomous robots are starting to use a lot more.
Is that just something the robot can recognize?
Yeah, it's basically something that the robot would be able to recognize and be able to aim to the goal with. So there's 2 different ways you could aim to the goal.
Okay, cool.
And we'll get to that in the manual with a little bit more details as well. Okay, is there anything I missed? Oh, there is the ramp zone is this kind of white taped off area up into and including the entire ramp. So there's some specific defense penalties and things that will happen inside of here. Basically, defenders can't be in their opponent's ramp zone at all. Okay. General questions about the game before we get into the rules?
So there's no human player?
Oh, there is a human player, so that's a good
Yeah, I was
question.
gonna say, you forgot
Good
the
question. We can talk about human players. Okay, so when balls are scored, you have to use your imagination a bit because we didn't count it all, but basically they would all, from all 4 of the potential scoring locations, they would all get funneled into these bins. So then the human player so this would be the red human player, would take the balls from the blue, that blue scored, and they would dump them back into this ramp and they would feed back in the balls. Oh, I completely forgot about what happens at the end of auto. Okay, back up a little bit. So at the start of the match, this platform right here, we didn't actually CAD the ramp. It's one of the things that we have left to do. But basically there'd be a door here and this platform would hold 250 small balls, and there'd be 250 more small balls on the blue platform over here. As soon as auto ends, all 250 get dumped out from the 2 feeder stations. And then during the match, the human players can take their bins and refeed out small balls and big balls if they want. They can also take big balls and throw them over the driver station wall. So they can throw big balls as far as they want onto the field.
How many big balls are there?
That is a bigger question for the manual, but because we can go through how many their total are, but we can look through the manual for that. That's one of the things we always have to look up. That wouldn't be in the video normally. Other questions? Is there anything I missed that's normally in the manual? Something about robots being built robustly because there is going to be interaction, right? Bumpers and hitting people and running into other robots. Any other useful things, Kathleen, that I didn't go over?
I think you're good.
Okay.
I probably forgot something, but we'll go over it in the manual.
Yeah,
so.
probably. Okay. Any other questions before we dive into the manual a little bit? Okay, so I think this is a reasonable game. We haven't seen too many giant holes in the game yet. It's very possible we get there. Okay, so we have the full roll-up manual. That's this disclaimer and links to our old game. Then we have the full table of contents. So this is intentionally as complete of a manual as we could get. There's definitely some room for improvement that we're gonna add more to and complete a lot of parts of the end of the game that we haven't finished yet. But everything is there for us to be able to do the kickoff, at least now, since we have a better understanding of the game. Yeah, okay. So this is kind of just the general concepts of the game that exist in the real manual too. There's kind of a summary. Autonomous is 15 seconds, and the driver control is 2 minutes and 15 seconds, like normal. Arena is the same size as normal. It's basically 27 by 54. It's a little bit narrower than that, but that's pretty standard even in normal games. So if you've seen an FRC field before, it's basically that same size that you can think about in your head, other than we have these corner cutouts that definitely add some playable room too, right? Because the robots can drive up into their ramps and things. Okay. Sort of field detail. So each team does have a quarter pipe goal and a quarter pipe feeder. They're always on the right. So the red driver station is next to their quarter pipe feeder, and the blue driver station is next to their quarter pipe feeder. Let's see. Yeah, so we looked at the zone lines already. Red zone, neutral zone, blue zone. Ramp zones, there's one in each corner. Speed bump down the middle, initiation line for Auton, and starting line is for the drivers to stand behind during autonomous mode. Okay. Kind of generic player station stuff that's in every manual. Talks about like how we plug in our laptops and everything. All of that exists. We did intentionally, like I said, we left as many of the details in as is in a normal FRC manual, just so we can give an idea of what it's like to read through a real FRC manual as much as we can, because there's a lot of details. Okay, how do we want to go through the manual? I think that's part of what our new question is. Because I definitely don't want to read the manual to everyone. That seems awful.
Where are we going with
it seems awful. So let's make a plan. Do we want to go through and answer some of the questions? Do we want to have people? Do we want to discuss certain sections of it? Like, I really want to get through the meat of understanding kind of the game and things relatively quickly, so we can get to the more fun part about discussing strategy and everything. Any thoughts?
I mean, we could give people like time to fill out what they know now.
That makes sense. Do we want to, I was gonna say, do we want to do like breakout rooms to have people be able to answer some of the questions? They can be relatively big, but we can make it a little bit easier to not have to talk into everything, into the whole group.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let's do that for a second. So basically our goal is to get this understanding the game questions answered reasonably well, right? So there's 18 of them. Some of them you can answer basically just by things I already told you. Some of them you may need to look at the manual to find, right? Most of them should all be game and field related. There's probably a couple that may need you to get into the beginning of robot, but you shouldn't have to get too far into robot. If you're like somehow digging through electrical rules, you've probably gone too far. Let me stop the screen share so I can figure out a breakout room situation. Okay. There are 16 participants. How many breakout rooms do we want to do? We probably need some amount of like a leader-ish people in each one, right? We have four is probably reasonable. What?
Someone just left.
we can do 4. Okay,
Yep.
so let me figure out how to do this. So I have reasonable-ish. Oh, like Ethan's one of the people too. Okay, it's fine. and me and Suan, it'll work out. We'll figure it out. Okay. Okay, so I put the people who are planning to be subsystem managers roughly into their own groups, with 2 people having to be added together. And then everyone else, I'm just gonna like go down the list and figure out how to add people. That seems fine. This process is complicated. Wait, I thought I already added this person. This process is more complicated. Okay, 4.
Oh, someone joined back. Okay.
Okay, hopefully that is all of them. Okay, so everyone should be able to go into breakout rooms, and you should be able to have like, it's about to be 4. How much time do we want? Do we want 10-ish minutes? Do we want to do more than that?
10, 15, probably max, because it's just the first part.
Yeah, let's try for 10, and then we can figure. So try to go relatively quickly. Like even if you want to like start at the bottom and move up or something, however you want to do it, so we can kind of come back. I don't want to put too much time in this where people are just like not, or just bored in their rooms.
Understanding the game questions.
Yes, so just that those top 18 basically. They should be roughly manual questions. They should be relatively easy to get through. But ideally, you want to make sure everyone in your group has an understanding of them. Okay. I'm gonna open the rooms. Breakout rooms close automatically after. Ooh, that's cool. I can tell them to close automatically at 10 seconds. Or 10 minutes. 10 seconds is a really fast breakout room. Okay. All right, I'm assigning everyone to their rooms now. 10 minutes to get the top 18 questions done. That's exciting. There we go. Okay. Join breakout rooms. Put too much time on there, so we didn't expect everyone to. Do people want to go in and add? How do we want to do this? So do people know what breakout room number they were? Does anyone have any? Is that a thing that you know?
I was 1.
Okay, that is. Felipe was 2. Chris, Grisa, Janet, your room was 3, and then Mason, Ethan, everybody, your room was 4. Okay. So We could have done it that way before, but I didn't. So go ahead, like on the main document, which I put a link to in chat, put your, do your room numbers question and multiples of your room number and plus 4 your room numbers question. So like Kathleen, you were group 1, so do 1 and 5 and 10.
Okay, gotcha.
Is that nope, it's 9 because I can math. I was like looking through this and I was very confused.
Wait, if I'm in group 2, which ones do I do?
2,
2,
6,
6, and
10.
Oh, so just add 4.
Correct, which I did
Yeah.
poorly when I demonstrated it a second ago.
Because if you did multiples of your room number, then Kathleen would be doing all of them.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so not multiples. It's add 4. Correct. I said the wrong thing.
Oh, wait. Shoot.
I mean, I could. I don't really want to.
Oh, wait. I don't have edit access.
Oh, hit request and I can approve
Yeah.
it, I think, somehow.
Can you send the link in the chat again, please?
Again?
It's in the.
Yeah, because I logged in on my iPad and the chat doesn't like save. from
Oh, I have to
before.
figure out where the chat is. Hold on. Okay. I gotcha.
Wait, Felipe, if you tap it and go to more, you could see the chat from there, I think.
It's
From
it's
before
pasted
I did.
again. It's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, here I can actually just anyone with link can edit for now, and then I'll try to remember to turn that off before we ruin things.
Wait, do I need to be on a school account or something?
No, now you should just be able to edit it no matter what. I made it so anybody can edit now.
Oh, I gotta refresh the page then.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, we're still working on how to get everyone drive access. A lot of people get it Thursday when we do communication training.
A lot of anonymous squirrels.
Mhm.
Make question stand out. Yeah, and if we didn't get to some of them, that's fine. We will do them as a group or leave them to be done as we go. Okay. Nope. No. Cool. Okay. I hear less typing, so I'm assuming most people are close to being finished. There's some edits still going on. Okay. Feel free to keep going. I'm just going through making sure we're reasonable. I think most people got the zones thing, or should have. That would have been pretty. That was pretty standard.
Mhm.
The 3 different main elements. Yeah, the goal, feeder, and speed bump. 2 different balls, 5-inch, 10-inch. Yeah, so fuel from 2017 and boulders from 2016. So we can go back. One of the nice things about this is we can kind of look at how robots interacted with those game pieces in past games, since we're using game pieces that already existed, which you normally wouldn't do. This one, I think we need some more details. And I think it's in the rule book somewhere.
Which one?
The ball setup. So this is a little bit more complicated. So yeah, so this is basically the ball setup is right here. And that's basically the entire answer to that question, I think. Where do game pieces begin the match, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and overrule that because there was a little bit of a confusion in the answer that I saw. Mostly just that there was there's some tiny details that are kind of weird. So yeah, so there was a discussion. There are a lot of small balls. There are about 500 small balls to 560. So each team may preload up to 10 small balls such that they are fully on their robot. So you can't have the small balls only touching your robot. The small balls have to be fully within your robot. And any small ballers that aren't preloaded just aren't part of the game for that match. So if no team preloads a small ball, there's only 500 total small balls for the match. If every team preloads all 10 of their small balls, there's 560. At the beginning of the match, there are 18 big balls total. 12 are on the center, and then each team has 1 big ball that is either in contact with the robot is in contact with the robot and then not touching anything else except for possibly the field carpet. So you can either be holding it or you can have it next to you, touching you. That way, like, all the big balls are required to be in play, but all the small balls aren't, just because there's so many of them. It didn't make sense to like try to figure out where to put them and things. Okay, so that answer got done. Are there any restrictions on the number of game pieces? Yeah, so at the beginning, 1 big ball at the beginning, only 10 small balls at the beginning. After the start of the match, the limits are 2 big balls and this 18-inch limit for small balls. Does anyone who kind of got here and read this want to explain what that rule is?
I can explain it.
Anyone not who didn't help write the rule?
That's
Sorry, that's what I was going for there. I'm trying to figure out if people understood it
Okay.
who are just like getting introduced to it today.
Wait.
It should be.
Oh yeah.
It's one of the G rules,
So
Mm-hmm.
so the robots. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Grisha.
So it's basically each robot has to have a clear and distinct marking that basically marks the height of 18 inches on the robot. and if it's kind of like it'll help the referees to see when the small balls in the robot is like above the height limit of 18. That's kind of what the 18 inches is about. So that's why it's a height instead of a number of balls.
Right, yeah, because it'd be really hard. So that, like, from the people who designed the game, it'd be really, if we were actually playing it, it'd be really, really hard to tell how many small balls the robot had, right? Because there's a big mass of them. There can be, there can be dozens of them. It'd be really hard to do that. So we came up with this idea for the line, which is definitely still hard to ref, but more it makes for interesting design decisions. So yeah, definitely keep in mind this idea that you have to store your small balls below 1.5 feet from the floor, and kind of think about what that does to your robot design for other parts of your robot, for expansion, for anything else that you want to do with your with our design once we get there, and kind of our strategy as well. Like, how many
Can I
balls do
make
we
a
think we can hold?
suggestion?
Yep.
So one thing we could do, it would be hard to judge the height of 18 inches. One thing that we could do theoretically to make it a little bit easier to judge is have maybe a limelight on the top of the robot that kind of like at the mark of 18 inches and maybe looking down on a signal. And if the signal in the limelight is like interrupted for, let's say, like more than 3 seconds, then that kind of assumes that a ball is crossed and is staying above the 18-inch mark, and that kind of sets off an alarm or something.
Oh, you're talking about just like for us to know that we're not above it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or if we are above it, like if like the signal from the limelight to maybe a marker
So yeah,
on
so
the
it wouldn't
opposite side of
be,
the
so it wouldn't be like a limelight, because a limelight is like a vision tracking thing, right? It would be like some sort of beam break, like a security system sensor or whatever. Yeah, that is an idea, and we'll get to implementation stuff more as we go. But right now, most of what we're trying to do is strategy and kind of like what the robot does, not necessarily how it does it, right? So the idea that we should figure out a way to not store balls over 18 is kind of where we want to stop the plan, kind of like, okay, yeah, we don't want a robot to be able to break this rule very often. We should think of ways to do that. We don't necessarily want to list too many of those during the kickoff session as much as we can, because at some point what ends up happening is, if as we go through all this, we'll very quickly be like, oh, I know exactly how we can climb or whatever, and then you'll run down that path in your head on thoughts, and you'll be really far down that path, and then we find out, oh, it doesn't quite work with this other thing, and then we have to like reel people back in. So it's much better to know kind of the how and the what we want it to do, and not how we want to do it for a little while, right? Very quickly we'll get into the how we're going to do it, and kind of that brainstorming. But for the initial kind of just understanding the game, we very much want to kind of, as much as we can, reel in our thoughts to what do we want the robot to do and not how do we want it to do it. It's a little bit tricky, because I find myself doing it constantly, where I'm just like, ooh, the robot could look like this, and I'm like, oh wait, nope, we're not there yet, bring it back. Okay, yeah, so that 18-inch limit is going to be really crucial to our design stuff, just because it's a rule we've never had before. It's a rule that's never, as far as I know, not been in FRC before. So it's definitely something kind of weird to think about, where you can't just have this big open bin and store all the balls we want there. Okay, so yeah, where and how are game pieces on the field?
Wait, hold on.
Oh, sorry, what's up?
Is 18 inches from the ground or like in the robot?
From the carpet.
Okay. Just wondering.
Yeah, so you can do there's all sorts of weird implications of that, right? Like, do you pull other things out of that space so you can store more balls there? Like, there's all sorts of weird potential implications of that idea. Game pieces enter the field. Yeah, so at the beginning, it's those 250 small balls from opposite corners come barreling down right at the end of Auton. And there are 12 balls at the start. And then after that, the balls can either be rolled down the feeder ramps, or they can be or the big balls can be thrown over the human player station, right? But that's only big balls. You can't throw the small balls over the feeder station. Big balls only. This sentence no longer makes sense.
Right.
Somebody want to fix this C sentence? That's no longer a sentence. Are game peoples returned to the game after being stored? If so, how? Okay, so what's the answer to this one? Anybody?
Like anyone?
I mean, preferably in general, preferably not Kathleen or I. Again, we wrote the manual. So did anyone find the answer to this? Are game pieces returned like after we score them? Are they put back into the field at some point?
I know Sunny knows it.
Geez, on the spot. So when the blue team scores the game pieces, the red team takes control of it and will collect those balls for their own to put into their own feeder.
Yes.
Bad way to put it.
What is my keyboard doing? This is a mess. Okay. I am not typing that poorly, I promise. I really need to get a new keyboard. Let's go with Red Alliance. Let's control of. Oh my goodness. This is I just can't type anymore. Somebody else got to type. Like this is all lag on my keyboard. I'm not typing at the moment.
Blame it on the keyboard. Okay.
That's really bad. I just changed the batteries. I don't know what's happening. I think it's dying. It's time to buy a new keyboard.
Yeah, you have a wireless keyboard. That's the problem. Get a wired one. They're so much better.
Okay.
Sunny, do you want to type what you just said?
Okay, so we can score game pieces into the various goals. You can score points by moving in auto. Any stages of climbing. Scoring balls is a repeatable point source, but there are no other repeatable ways. Yeah, so you can only get the climbing points once. That's reasonable. It's not explicitly asked in here, but how many points, how many robots can get the most climbing points? Did anyone read that part?
It's one, right?
Other answers?
Two.
Not one. Okay, I know the rules. Okay, I'm getting there.
It's two. So each alliance can have one of their robots on each of the quarter pipe, fully climbed.
Oh, I didn't see the word each. That's a shame.
Okay, yeah. So game pieces are basically from anywhere on the field plus their starting locations, and you can take them from anywhere as long as your robot's allowed to be there, right? But yeah, so you can't be in their ramp zones and take balls, but you can be in their colored zone, in their other alliance zone. Scored. Yeah, so all the balls are scored in the quarter pipe goals, but there's 4 different scoring locations: lower, outer, inner, and high. And they all have different points. So this is the time where we can discuss point values. Okay. This is definitely a little bit weird in this game, and it's weirder in this game than I think it is in like any other game. Okay, so small balls first. So during auto, the lower goal, which is basically missing all of the rings, is 1 point for a small ball. The outer ring, which is the largest ring, is 2. The inner ring is 4, and the top ring is 8. In Teleop, the lower goal is 0. So if you don't get it into one of the rings with a small ball, you don't get any points. The outer ring is 1, the inner ring is 2, and the top ring is 4. For the big balls, the lower goal in auto is 5, so it's the same. It's the same in auto as it is in teleop for the lower goal. So if you don't make it into one of the rings in auto, you don't get a bonus. You just get the same amount of points as you would in teleop. The outer ring is a 5-point bonus, so you get 15 points for the outer ring in auto, and the inner ring is a full 30 points, which is 10 points more than the inner ring in teleop. The teleops are 5, 10, 20. And then you cannot put a big ball into the top ring. It won't happen. We promise. The ball is the same size as the top ring. It's not going in that hole. It's never going to happen. And then the parking points are low park 10, high park 30, hanging, which should be climbing. I renamed some things today. I apologize. Is 60. Is 60 points. The exit from the initiation line is only 5, so you don't get a ton of points for that. There are some ranking point things, which we can go over now, that come up in other questions. So to get 1 ranking point, your alliance has to score 120 small balls and 12 big balls. So the points you get from them don't matter. And also, one of the things that I don't think we actually thought about until I just thought about right now is if you score a small ball in the lower goal in teleop, it counts for this 120, which I don't think any of us have thought about until this moment.
Well,
But I believe that is true, and I'm actually totally okay with that. I think it actually is a very valuable thing because you can just force your way to get a ranking point without actually changing your point total. You can just dump small balls as fast as you can and get yourself to a ranking point without actually getting any more points.
What's the difference between a point and a ranking point?
That is a good question. So ranking points are used in the meta of the game, right? So you don't the ranking point doesn't affect that individual match. The ranking point affects your entire rank in the event. So if you win the match, you get 2 ranking points. If you get a tie in a match, you get 1 ranking point. And there's these other tasks in a match that can get you 1 ranking point each. So if you have like a perfect match, you end up with 4 ranking points at the end of it. And then the person or the team with the most ranking points at the end of qualifying gets to seed number 1. And then going down the list based on your ranking points, or it's technically ranking score, which is ranking points divided by number of matches, but everyone plays the same number of matches, so it's all equal at the end. It's number of ranking points. Yeah, so these tasks aren't necessarily important to each individual match, but they are important to the entire event. So in FRC in general, there's always this kind of weird thing where you are playing matches, but winning that specific match isn't the only important thing. You also have to win the event. So there's somewhat almost like side quests that have to happen in the match to allow you to ideally win the entire event. And this would be one of those things, right? Because these tasks are partial to you winning the match because you do most of the time get points for them, but we introduced a thing that doesn't get you points possibly, but helps you get a ranking point, which was somewhat on accident, but it's kind of cool. I really can't believe we didn't think of that.
I know.
We didn't even notice until right now. This is why we have this kickoff thing, because the GDC doesn't. I mean, the GDC also doesn't notice some things like that sometimes. Whoop, nope. I just did a very bad thing. We're gonna have to undo that. I accidentally deleted the table.
Don't do it.
Oops. Okay. Yeah, that's not good. Kathleen worked hard on making this nice table. Okay, so back to our questions. Where are we at? So some height. So, well, that's a confusing height. What is this?
Should just be 96.
But why is this the height? Like, this is the height that matters, though, right? The heights of all the locations of the goals. Like, none of the balls have to reach 96 inches, right?
That's the height of the quarter pipe goal. That's the location where they're scored. Or are you talking about the rings?
No,
Oh,
but that's like
yeah.
the top of the goal, right? Like, that's the top of the entire structure. That's not the height of the goal, right?
Hey,
Like, ideally, we're not putting balls at that height. Like, that'd be bad. Like, that's
Yeah.
the roof. Like, we don't care about the roof. I don't actually think the heights are in the manual. That's one of the things we probably
I
should
don't think
figure
so
out.
either.
Also, the heights are. It's also really weird to even describe heights here, right?
I know. For
Um,
for the inner and
yeah, it's a super weird thing to describe
Yeah.
for. This entire task isn't normal. So like this question, which is kind of a generic question, normally asked for like any game, this is a very weird one for this specific game. Because when you start looking at what like the lower goal height is, in theory, it's some like any amount, it's some big range, right? It's past the top of this because
You could list the height.
as long as the ball gets above this, it probably is going in the lower goal. But then the other ones, you have to figure out, they're at like some weird angle. So is it like the center height from the floor, but it only sort of is? So I don't necessarily know that question actually makes sense. And that's one of the things we have to think about too. Like we'll generate a sheet like this before kickoff, and we have to kind of adjust sometimes to the game to say, does this question actually matter? Right? Like, does this height question for the goals matter for what we're doing? Probably not. There's some other much more important task of like, difficulty of the shot, right, compared to just like the height, because a lot of like what we're designing eventually for the robot doesn't really care about the height of the goal specifically. It's more of like a weird velocity problem to like how fast does the ball have to go to be able to get to these heights, right? We don't care we don't care how tall we are to be able to launch up there or something, because we're rolling the balls all up the ramp. Or at least that's the
Instead of the height,
original intent.
Instead of the height, you could maybe replace it with the angle that the pane that the ring is on.
Even then, that doesn't really matter for what we're doing. Like, you can know that angle, and it's useful to know that angle, but it's not. There's a lot more to it. There's no one dimension that is going to be super critical, like normally like a shot height is or something. It's a much more complicated launching task than we've had in the past. In terms of just like defining it, it's not necessarily more complicated than actually doing it, because you're just rolling a ball. But figuring out exactly how to be accurate and like knowing that is a little bit different than just like knowing you have to get it above some height. Okay, where's my Chrome tab?
Hey, Alan.
Yep.
I've got to get off. Is there any like homework I should do or anything?
There's nothing specific. It's really just kind of understanding what the game is, and then thinking about any of these like the bottom questions down here.
Okay, I'll look at
are kind
those.
of useful, and just kind of like a lot of it's like kind of describing, drawing what kind of robot you think is going to work, because that's one of the things we'll start talking about later.
Okay. All right. See y'all later.
All right. Bye, Jacob.
Bye.
Hi, Jacob.
Okay. Yeah. So this is it's more complicated than just heights. These ones are pretty close. So the climbing line is 36 inches from the field carpet. The lower bar is approximately 45. It ended up being a little off when we catted it. It was at some point supposed to be like 48, and it just like didn't. There was a reason it couldn't be there. So it ends up being about 45. And then 96 is the center of the bar from the field carpet to the top bar. So it's a full 8 feet. Yeah, the restrictions on where game pieces can be scored. Yeah, big balls can't be scored in the top ring. That makes sense. You can score small balls in the low goal, but they just don't count for any points. It's good to remember. But now we know they do count for the ranking point goal, which is interesting. All the different penalties exist. Fouls are relatively minor compared to tech fouls, which are pretty big. But I think it's probably reasonable. You probably have fewer matches swayed by fouls, but it is relatively easy in most cases to elevate them to tech fouls if you start doing things to pull an advantage from taking fouls. And that's one of the places we have not investigated nearly as much either. So there may be, if for some reason there's a point in our strategy discussion where we realize we should like intentionally abuse a penalty to get an advantage in the match, we probably should change the rule because we wrote the game and we haven't investigated like the exact weights of all the fouls and tech foul stuff nearly as much as we probably should have. So we should probably avoid that section of the conversation just because that's not a place where we weren't focusing on that, so we shouldn't be poking holes at that too much. But if we do, we can edit the rules and make it a more complete game if we need to. So this is a little odd. So you just can't start with more. It's not a penalty, right? Like you wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't let you start the match. So like you can't holding more than 10 balls during auto isn't the question because you just can't start the match. So if you manage to acquire more than 10 balls during auto, you can do it. If you manage to acquire more than one big ball during auto, you can. You just can't start the match with those numbers. So you're allowed to intake more balls during the autonomous period. Okay. Other thinking. That's not really a sentence either. Holding. This height rule makes it hard to write these like sentences. Holding.
Yeah.
That's a sentence. Okay. Sure. Yeah, more than one robot going into an opponent zone. So, what are the complications or implications of having this only one robot in your opponent zone rule? Like, what does this do for gameplay?
Maybe limit the aggression potential a little bit.
The what potential? Sorry.
The aggressive potential that each team can have.
Maybe reword what you're trying to say. Like, are you trying to say like people can't play as much defense? Is that what you're like? Is that what you're using as aggressive?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does. So assuming we're the blue alliance, we can only have one of our alliance members in anywhere in the red zone, and the red zone is the entire length of the field in this third of the field, right? So yeah, so that means we can only have one defender. So they would potentially be over on this goal side, and they're trying to stop people from scoring balls into their goal. What does that mean for blue robots that are playing offense over here? Can one of them come over here and like get balls that come out of the feeder station?
Not unless the balls roll into the neutral zone.
Right. So if the balls roll into the neutral zone, then the blue robots who, if they have a defender, can go get it. If not, if like a blue robot really needed to come over here, the defender would have to move out first, right? Because you can only have one at a time. So depending on how the balls like roll through the feeders and how you do like the dumps, there's reason for like if you need to be able to get more balls, your defender may have to leave that zone for a bit for your offensive robots to come get balls. Okay. Strategically blocking a robot from feeder. Yeah. So the ramp zone penalties are pretty big. Where's my that's not what I wanted to happen. Interesting. Oh. The split screen thing is getting complicated. Okay, here we go. So yeah, so your ramp zones are a pretty decent amount of space, but so you can't park a defender robot directly in front, or you can't put them like on the ramp and stop all of the balls. They have to play outside of this white area. So if you have someone trying to like play goalie or something, they're driving along this white line and they're staying outside of the ramp zone.
So the intent to block is still allowed.
Yeah, you can block all you want. You can play defense. You just can't be inside the ramp zone while you do it. You can't be in the ramp zone at all. Because if you're in the ramp zone at all and somebody tries to shoot, then you're already blocking them. So you have to avoid going into the ramp zone. So you can come over here, you can be in this zone, but you have to be outside that white tape while trying to block other goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, going into an opposing ramp zone is illegal.
Even if you get like pushed in, it's still a penalty.
Is that how we worded it?
Sorry, which one is this?
I think we made it to where, yeah, it's a pretty, I remember it being a pretty aggressive penalty. That's one of those ones where we may need to potentially change it. We went back and forth on exactly how to enforce that rule. Okay, so foul plus an additional foul is not corrected. Yeah, basically, if you're in there, it doesn't matter who instigates the thing. So if you're pushed into somebody's ramp zone, it is still a foul on you, plus an additional foul for every 5 seconds in which you have not corrected it. And then if you do the egregious things, it moves up to a yellow card very quickly. So if you like drive into the ramp and park there, trying to block all of the goals, it's not a foul, it's a yellow card. But if somebody shoves you into their ramp zone, it's a foul on you, and then you have like 5 seconds to escape, basically. If someone else holds you in, there's a penalty somewhere that we can make that. I assume that exists. The don't force people to take rule penalty somewhere in here. I don't actually, is that in there? I assume it's in there.
I don't
It
know.
can also be a pin, right?
If they were forced, if they kept you in there, it would be a pin, yeah, because it would be trapping or whatever you want to call it. They're confining you to a small enough space. I don't actually know if the don't force people to take. I assume it is. Yeah, the G20 now. Robot actions appear deliberate to the referee that cause damage or manipulation to attaching. Nope, that's not it. Wait, does that rule not exist? Well, that's a questionable decision on our part. Where'd that rule go? Okay, well, we need to discuss whether the forcing people to take penalties rule is a rule or not, because I assumed it was, but I actually don't know if it's in the manual. Different, interesting problem. That's normally a rule. Well, I'm concerned. Is it not a 2020 rule? If I just like forgot.
I don't think I would have deleted it.
Yeah, neither do I. I don't think either of us would have, so I'm confused now.
Back in.
Okay, last couple questions. Yeah, so these are kind of right above this too. We already talked about the zone, so we're not gonna harp on that again. And same with one opposing robot in the opponent's zone, but it's really not like the opposite side of the field. It's the left third of the field is your opponent's zone, basically. Driver vision is somewhat interesting, right? So they're viewing everything across the field. So let's pretend we're red real fast, and we come down here. So if we are in one of these driver stations, if we are in one of these driver stations, you can kind of see, you can definitely see most of where the goal is, because all the stuff on the side is clear. There is one kind of tricky thing in that while you're shooting, you're down here and you can kind of always see, and your further left driver stations will have a better view looking kind of more at a straight angle. When you come to climb though, so this one's not so bad. You're on the other side of the field, so you're far away, but you're still looking at the back of your robot. When you go to climb on this goal, on the feeder goal, you are driving back towards yourself. And if you're in, and like basically you're climbing next to yourself if you're in this driver station, right? Like you could be standing here and literally climbing basically next to yourself, which you can definitely see it. But if you're over here and you're trying to do that same thing, there could be 8 people in your way plus your own people possibly, which gets a little trickier. So depending on driver station location, which is randomized every match, this climb could be a little tricky if you don't have some way to do it either automated or with cameras or something else. Okay. Any?
I found the rule. It's C8.
Oh, that makes sense. They moved to a C rule. That's
Yeah,
reasonable.
and we didn't change anything because there's still trench and control panel.
Is there really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Questionable. I thought we control F that one. Apparently not. Ooh.
No, there was something that we could, I think this, maybe not, but there was something that I control F and it was ours.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Yeah. So C8 exists, but we definitely need to change the trench and control panel references out of that. Okay. Oh, we didn't. We can briefly talk about the vision targets real fast. We didn't go through that in those questions. I'm just trying to think of anything about the field that we need to discuss before we start talking strategy, which is what I really want to do. And it's almost already 5, so I want to get through this relatively quickly. Okay, so somewhere up here, there's some vision targets. Okay, so yeah, so like I said earlier, this kind of half trapezoid thing is basically the same vision target as the 2020 goal. It did change shape a little bit, but it wouldn't be too difficult to have the limelight track that. This like white square, each one of them would be filled with one of these 4 patterns. And so each one of these patterns would specifically mark either the blue feeder, blue goal, red feeder, red goal. So your robot could identify which thing it was looking at, not just that it was seeing a vision target. It would know which goal or which quarter pipe it was looking at. The other thing that April tags allow you to do is relatively easily get your angle from how they're posted. So if this is like flat against here, you can know that you're looking at it at like a 45-degree angle or at a 30-degree angle. So you can know how far off of like center you are to the April tag. So like the algorithms that use this are pretty cool. There's actually a phone app, if I can figure out if I still have the correct one on here. Oh no, that's the weird one. There's one that allows you to like map things to real life that gets really weird, that can work with April tags. There was an easier one, but I don't think I remember where it is. I will try to we'll do that demo later on. But there are phone apps that can read April tags. And they can tell you how far away you're turned and everything. So there's a lot of computer vision software kind of already written that allows these to do really cool things back to the robot. Okay, any other questions or things people don't quite think they understand about kind of what the game field and general game rules are? Okay. Okay, so the actual more kind of inventive questions and sort of like deductive reasoning questions that we have to think about are where we have to start using all that stuff we just went over and learned about rollup to help us figure out how we're going to what kind of constraints we have on our designs, and then what information do we need to be able to actually do our designs, right? So in general, we can assume for right now, we can assume we're going to design something at some point, right? They may not all make the robot. We're going to design something to interact and kind of accomplish most of the game scoring tasks, right? We're going to be able to move off the initiation line. We can assume right now that we're going to at least test and play with how to shoot or how to launch both types of balls, how to intake both types of balls, and how to do the climbing task. So with all of that, what are some of the field and game dimensions, elements that are kind of going to be important to our actual kind of our design goal? Like what things are we going to reference if we're like sketching things? What are those things that we're going to be sketching regularly to kind of work on? Okay, this exists. Our part of our robot has to do this to interact with it. Does that make sense? The easiest example is small and big ball size. Right, like that's clearly going to be a very critical element to everything we design. We could design a great robot, but if it only works with 6-inch balls and we don't have a 6-inch ball, it doesn't really matter. Other suggestions for kind of key dimensions from the game and field?
the size of the climb bar?
That's a good one. Diameter of climbing bar. We can put height while we're there. Height of climbing bars.
The speed bump, because you need to build a good drivetrain that can deal with that.
That's a good question. Yeah. Height and angle, width, etc. of speed bump. Yeah, because however, a robot has to be able to drive over that regularly, potentially pull balls from it, right? Because you have all those balls that start there, so you have to be able to intake balls that are on top of it.
Be like height of the vision target.
That's a good one. Yeah, height and location. Ooh, what is keyboard's failing? Oh my goodness. See, not typing. See, typing. Okay. Oh,
DLC.
oh, that got weird. I don't know what just happened there.
It's close enough.
Ah! Everything broke.
Looks about right.
I don't know what's going on anymore. This is a really hard kickoff where I'm not allowed to type, apparently.
Wait, Nick, what'd you say? Height and something?
Height and location
height of
of vision
the
target
target.
is what I added location.
Potentially the dimensions of the ramp.
Also,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
that's
So dimensions of ramp. What was the next one?
Be like maximum angle of the ramp also.
Yeah, I think that can all go into that. Dimensions, angle, something like that. Whatever it is. Okay. Are there other? What are the other ones? Oh, the bigger one is the limit on small ball capacity. Like that's definitely a dimension that is part of the game dimension. So that the 18-inch height cap for small balls is definitely a weird one.
The 36 line on the side of the quarter pipe for your climb to get your bumpers up.
Yeah, 36-inch climbing line. Small ball ramp. What? That's not even a. Just typing words here. Not even related. All right, small ball limit is what I wanted. Okay. I think that's a decent list. Anyone have anything else?
Initiation line.
I don't think are we designing for it? I don't think so.
Yeah,
right?
not really. No
Like, there's probably some. There is probably eventually there's like a bunch of auton pathing stuff where you have to figure out how far the initiation line is to like the goal and how far it is to the speed bump to potentially get more balls and like all of those things. But I don't think that's like we're probably not designing for that as much as like later on we will for the controls auton stuff if we were doing it. But I don't think a large amount of our robot is changing for it. One of the ones that does matter potentially is so we're allowed to hold 2 big balls, right? How far apart they are at the start on the speed bump matters, because I remember like a lot of times when we were dealing with our intake last year, we were worried about how far apart the balls were on the barriers, because if we're trying to just drive in at them, we want to make sure we can get 2 of the big balls in some reasonable driving path. And not have to like get one and then back up and get a second one. Okay.
Also, just where the goals are, is that included in any of the ones we said? Like how far away, how high?
Dimension angle of the ramp. Yeah, we can add goals to this. That's reasonable. Because yeah, all of that's going to matter, but it's really hard to type all of that out in any sort of dimension. Okay. Yeah, so if there's any dimensions that people can fill in here for some of them, feel free. Just so the more we kind of know those dimensions in our head, the better. Because as you're designing it, you can kind of get some amount of perspective and intuition about what is going to make some sense as we're thinking about the game. But it's not critical that we have them all typed out right now. Okay, what are our restrictions on size? We haven't talked about that yet, right?
Smaller than like the diameter of the ramp.
That's not what the question is. This is like an actual robot rule question, right? So now we have to start getting into what are we allowed to build. So we've gone through mostly game rules. Now we start going into the actual robot construction rules. So there are a lot of robot construction rules, right? Game rules are only the first 37 pages. The rest of the manual is robot rules, tournament rules, and inspection rules, I believe, and like the glossary at the end. So there are a lot of robot rules. So we added an R0 because we didn't want to relabel all of the robot rules because we went through the process and it became very complicated. So now there's an R0 because we just needed to add a robot rule and it didn't make sense to put it at the end, and it's now at the beginning. Okay, so basically this is just that they have to have a clear and distinct mark for that 18-inch limit on the small balls, and it might be more complicated than that too. And like how we would go about laying all that out. We must have a frame perimeter. Does it not say what the...
It says the actual thing on R3.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, it's somewhere. I was like, I know how this works.
I was confused too.
Yeah, I was like, I know how this works.
There.
But this is also how the real manual works, we promise. So it's very confusing sometimes. So yeah, so R3 is really the dimensions we were looking for here, right? So starting frame perimeter of 120 inches. So the way the frame perimeter works is you basically add up all the sides of your robot. If you were to like wrap a string around your robot too, so like you still have to add up all the length, even if you have a gap in your robot for like a ball to come in or something, that whole length of the side is still what you're adding up. It's like if you're wrapping a string around your robot and you measured that string, it has to be less than 120 inches. So yeah, so 120 inches frame perimeter and 48 inches tall. 20-inch frame perimeter. Except I deleted too much. Okay, and 48-inch height limit. So the beginning height limit is 4 feet tall. So it's a little bit shorter than some of our past robots and games. There are some expansion rules. So robots may not extend more than 15 inches past the frame perimeter. Limit 15 inches past frame perimeter. So that means if we extend like an intake or something, or an arm, or even potentially a launcher in this game or something, anything we extend past our initial frame perimeter can't go more than 15 inches past. Bumpers are roughly like 3-ish inches, a little bit smaller than 3 normally. So you have about a foot past your past your bumpers that you're allowed to extend. And that's in all directions too. So it's not like you can only do it like one extension or anything. You have anywhere you want, you can extend that far. During the end game, that expansion limit gets bigger. So during the end game, when fully contained within their ramp zone, you may extend 48 inches beyond your frame perimeter. So you can stick something 4 feet out straight in front of you if you're fully contained in your ramp zone during the end game. End game is the last 30 seconds of the match, right? I believe.
Yes.
Okay. And now my computer decides to be terrible. Okay. Interesting. Okay. What is happening? Yeah, my keyboard is just dying.
Wait,
Okay. There's another rule somewhere. Where's the height extension rule? That exists,
It
right?
should, yes, it definitely exists. Let me see. So, I think it's the tall robots one. No.
Oh, no, I done put that back for some reason. Okay. What's happening? I control Z'd too far, and now I messed up the thing I got right earlier, and I just really shouldn't be allowed to edit documents right now. Okay. It's close. Okay, wait, so yeah, where's the tall robots rule?
G14.
Okay, so it's a G rule, but it's currently not in our rules. That's a little bit awkward. Okay.
There should be something.
It probably should exist in that same whatever R5 or whatever it is. But yeah, so G14, robotic may not extend 72 inches, 6 feet above the carpet. So at no point during the game, end game, anything, can you ever extend 6 feet. I have no idea if any of that typed. I typed the whole thing. I don't think any of it did. Well, okay, somebody wants to fill that in with never extend above 6 feet, tall or high, however you want to word it.
Oh, did we already put weight limits?
We have not. That's a good idea. Yes, we can type weight limit in there.
I have to go, guys. I have a bunch of work to do. I'll see you later. See ya.
Bye, Nick.
See ya.
Bye.
All right. Now I have an on-screen keyboard up. This is going to be great. I really I have a wired keyboard somewhere. I looked for it. I don't know where it went. I may have taken it to the lab at some point. Okay, that's not fun.
You can just like run and get new batteries really quick. It'll be fine.
No, but I searched for new batteries the last time this happened, and I definitely don't have them. So I stole the last ones out of a remote. So now, so now that's where I'm at in my life is a large amount of AA's and 9 volts, but somehow no AAA batteries in my apartment.
Steal them from more remotes.
It's not a terrible plan.
No.
Yes.
I don't know how I'm gonna turn on my monitor anymore, but that's a different problem. Okay, what's the next thing? So key rules about robot design, game keys, cascade launching rules. So we went through most of these already. I don't think we have to answer this question too in depth. I think we have a good idea of those ones. If people want to fill that in, please do. Okay. Hey, it's starting to work again. What is the trade-off for end game compared to continuing to score? So this is an interesting question. So there are some games where it makes sense to just ignore the end game and just keep scoring, right? Like is the how many points basically do you have to, how many balls or cycles or whatever? We'll have to figure this out. Like this is going to take a little bit of thought, and kind of we can start taking our notes now, but we may not have an answer. But like if we could be fast enough at scoring, would it ever make sense to not do the end game, or do we have to be at really fast at the end game for that to make sense? So what are some of the trade-offs for, if we, let's start at the slightly easier one. If we just didn't do the end game, what are we losing in not doing the end game?
Well, assuming we climb, it's 60 points, right?
Right. So
That's a lot of points.
yeah. So no end game is losing 60 points. What else?
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, this is why we have the discussion, right? We're not saying we're going to do it. It's just the discussion. So we lose potential 60 points. What else do we lose?
Potential ranking point.
Yeah. The RP becomes
Also big.
very hard, right? So we also, so potential 60 points for not doing end game, but also there's potentially like a very fast 10 points that we could get, right? Like that low park is just like sending it towards the goal at the end of the match and just assuming it rolls up somehow somewhere close, right? So it may only be 50 points, but the RP becomes a lot harder.
I
Doing
might
the
have
end
missed
game.
this.
Oh, what's up?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go.
Is there like a amount of time you have to be on the ramp in order to get the high?
You have to stay there for you have to be on the ramp at 5 seconds after the match ends.
Okay, I see.
So you can't like roll back down or anything and be off it.
So it's not like you can just yeet yourself and just.
I mean, you could, as
hope
long
you
as
get up
you,
there.
manage to stay.
Stay up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yourself
Oh, I see what you're
hard
saying.
enough.
Yeah, you can't just like drive up and then like as soon as power rolls out, you roll back down and then you're just sad. Yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, doing the end game. So, oh, sorry. What?
Is the high park, is that like fully supported by the ramp? So someone's like low parked, like holding you up.
That counts.
Oh, okay.
Also, the climb is not fully supported by the bars either. So somebody could be low parked or parked and hold you up above the tape line too somehow. You're not allowed to fully support another robot at any point during the game though. So you have to be somehow not fully supported by another robot, but they could help you get up if somehow that ever existed.
Lots of cheesecake.
I don't know even what that cheesecake would look like. I have no idea what even. I mean, maybe I have no idea what that would be. Okay, so yeah, so what is doing the end game? What are we sacrificing? So there's like another mechanism, right? Almost certainly. Mechanism, weight, etc. Like there's design time, all of that.
Potential to just spam balls.
Time spent shooting or spent launching, scoring is probably a better word because we can just launching the balls doesn't matter if they don't go in the goals. Those are the main two things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is what we're sacrificing. Okay. So then what are the other questions? Does it require an additional mechanism? Yes. Almost certainly, right? I don't know how you use like I guess you could maybe use a ball intake or something, but it requires designing a mechanism around doing the end game. It's not just like driving to some spot, right? We could combine it with something else maybe, but you're still definitely thinking about it during the design phase. How fast do you need to be at the end game to make it worth it? So this is a much harder question that we probably can't answer yet because we don't know how fast anything is yet, right? But basically, we need to not be able to score 60 points in the same amount of time that it would take to get, or not be able to score more than 60 points in the same amount of time that it would take to do the end game. And we have to figure out what the value of that RP is, right? Just starting to figure out some things with the game. We can look at what 60 points really is. If I can get back to the goals, the thing. Well, it kind of is a lot, right? So
two big balls.
it's potentially two big balls in the inner ring, right?
Yeah.
It's potentially
no,
one.
No, it'd be 3, or I guess auto.
Oh, sorry, no, it's 3. You're right. You're right. 3.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's also like kind of hard to get.
Right. So it's like, yeah, it's at least at a minimum it's a cycle and a half. You assume it's 2 cycles of, it's 4 balls if you get 2 outer and 2 inner, right? So if you're somehow, if you're hitting a 50% inner ring clip with your big balls, you have to do 2 whole cycles to get the amount of climbing points. So realistically, even already, we can basically say, if we can do the climb task in the same amount of tasks it takes to do a big ball cycle, it's worth it to do the climb task, right? There's some weirder thing though, because we have the second scoring element. So if that works if we're a big ball only robot. If we're a robot that can do big balls and small balls in the same cycle, then there's this weird thing of how many small balls can we hold in a cycle, which we don't know yet, and how many small balls would we need plus, right? We can get, in theory, 40-ish points somehow. We can expected value that down to 30 maybe, 1 and 1. To get 30 small ball points, we need to score 15 in the inner ring. So there is some value to that where you could like judge it, but how fast can you do a double cycle of collecting small balls and collecting big balls and scoring them to be able to get your end game? And then how fast can you do that, right? So there's some amount of value as we get faster in our ball cycles, depending on if we're doing both or not, or however we're doing it, end game has to get faster with it, or eventually it does make sense just to keep doing balls, right? There is a way to score enough that if your end game is too slow, right? If your big ball cycles takes 20 seconds, it's easier in the idea if it takes 15 seconds, it's probably really fast. But if somehow you were doing big ball cycles in 15 seconds and your end game task was taking, 30 plus some setup time, it probably makes sense to just keep doing big ball cycles. If you're getting 30 points per cycle, which I don't even know if you are. So basically there's some logic there that you have to figure out. But I think from the beginning, I think your intuition that 60 points is a lot is valid. Because it also, from experience, we know that it should not take us 30 seconds to do the climb task, right? To get hung with our bumpers above the white line, we feel like just from other games, we've done things in similar ways faster than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we have some amount of design intuition and just experience that says we can probably climb quicker than 30 seconds.
Plus, I just feel like climbing is the safer option, because like if we end up scrambling for balls, that could make our cycles longer.
Right. Well, there's also, I completely forgot about this other point, is if we're not climbing and one of our partners is, they're partially blocking the goal, right? Like if they're high parked, we gotta like shoot around them, or we like curve, or we shooting curve balls, like what, banking things off walls, like what are we doing to get balls in there? It becomes very tricky potentially when your end game task is in the same spot as your goal. So that having that climbed where you can all kind of like shut down your launchers and all go climb makes things a little bit easier. If all of your partners do have climbers. That's also another thing to think about when we start thinking about exactly how our climber is. Does it make sense to be able to climb high enough to where balls can keep going under you if like you have a partner that's going to keep scoring while you're climbing?
It'd be kind of
You
crazy.
just climb on the feeder side, right?
Yeah, but you have two other partners, right? Maybe both of you are. One's on the feeder, you're on the goal side, the other person's funneling up some balls still.
Yeah.
That'd be
Or maybe they're
banging
coming into
balls.
park, but they happen to have balls with them and they want to spit them out while they're parking. Okay, how many robots can receive maximum endgame points? What's required for an alliance to do this? We kind of talked about this already. 2 can get max, right? We talked about this. Can get max. Max endgame points is what? For an alliance, sorry.
150.
2 robots climbing. And what is that? 2 robots climbing 1 high park.
Yeah, that's 150.
And that's equal to, what did you say, 150?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. Max 30 points each. Okay.
60 points each.
That is correct.
We should allow there to be like 3 at the climbing just to like see what people come up with.
So because we happen to have the people who wrote the rules here and why we didn't do that. So there's a variety of reasons, but the rough idea was we didn't want too much, like this is like a weird unsupported, it's not a very well supported bar, so we need to like strengthen it a lot if it's holding 200, almost 300 pounds. So that was part of it. Second, there's like a relatively easy way to like Robo Wrangler again, and we just didn't want to have to design Robo Wranglers all the time. So like that's part of it. We didn't want to keep making game tasks that you're just like, oh, I can Robo Wrangler again, yay! And it's like I don't want FRC Team Zef to just like narrowly make the best Robo Wrangler over and over. We've been doing this for like 4 years or whatever. Like the only year, no one tried one in 19, right? But like in theory, you could have kind of. It'd been really awkward. But like we've had lift your partner games 3 years in a row. Even though I don't think GDC really thought 2020 was going to be one, and nobody really did it. But I mean, we still tried, right? A bunch of people tried, and I think somebody would have probably gotten it to work by the end of the season. It wasn't worth it, but they probably would have. So that was the main reason of just not having a lift your partner game, since we've had 3 potential ones in a row.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. I don't want to spend too much time on this defense thing. We talked about it a little bit. Because especially for our design, we're not going to design a defensive robot just because like no one thinks there's like this lockdown defensive strategy and we can just clearly we shouldn't build an offensive robot and we should just build defense. Does anyone have that? Is there a way that exists?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so either. We helped design it. We tried to not allow that. There definitely were ones at different steps of this game where we didn't have ramp zones and things where you could have just wrecked the game. But we tried to plug all those holes. Okay, so playing defense, there's a couple different normal kind of standard FRC defensive strategies. So we had the one we already talked about where people are allowed to like kind of play goalie and try to block balls coming in, which is kind of interesting because if you're shooting from like way out here, they may have time to get in front of, especially if like a stream of balls, right? They may be able to interrupt your stream of balls. If you come into your ramp zone though, you can shoot from like right up here and there's nothing they can do because they're not allowed to enter there. What's the other sort of indirect defensive strategy that exists in some games where you're just stopping your opponents from being able to score?
You can just kind of like hover in the middle where the speed bump is, and then just kind of like stop them from going to the shooter area from feeder.
Oh yeah, so you could like play the line here, right? So you like stop them from coming. If they're coming back to get balls, you prevent them from kind of crossing the speed bump. So that's another defensive strategy. Is there a way to can you stop them from having balls? Can you like as an alliance, can you hoard balls?
You can try to a degree, but then that prevents other defensive measures.
So we can get into this is kind of a detail, but we've tried to play it to where it's reasonable. But so your the back of your goal, you're allowed to hold a maximum of 6 big balls behind your alliance station. Basically 1 in each of your human players' hands. Like they're not allowed to be stored on the carpet. I'm not sure exactly there's probably some ruling we need to add some details about how they're stored in bins, because I think right now you could probably, if like the bin doesn't fill up, you could store more than that somehow, but we can probably play with that. The idea is you only have 6 behind your driver station. That was the intent. So if you have 6 back there, each of your robots on your alliance is allowed to have 6, or is allowed to have 2. Whoa, that'd be bad. Each of your robots is allowed to have 2, so your alliance can have 6 on the field too. So that's 12. How many balls are in the field total?
For just the big balls.
Yeah, how many big balls total?
4.
What?
I don't
If
know.
there's 12.
How many? No, just how many are there? There are 18 big balls are on the
18.
field, right? So then,
Yeah.
if there's 12 in the, if there's 6 in the driver's station, 6 in your opponent's robot, your alliance still has 6 balls to play with, basically. So there's not a, they can limit the big balls that are in play a little bit, but they can't eliminate them. Small balls, however, so there's 500 small balls on the field. They're allowed to store some of them in their human player station in the bins until the bins get full. So if you, there's probably, I don't know, we'd have to figure out again how you like stack 18 and how you build things to hold lots of small balls, but there's probably a way for 3 robots, if they did it all together, to get a large portion of 500 balls in their robots. Right? I don't know exactly how much though. 500 is a lot. I doubt they're getting all of them. So ball hoarding seems like a somewhat limited strategy.
You can probably hoard big balls.
So you can get to 12. Is there a way that you think you can get to more than that?
Yes. You just have a robot sit in front of your feeder zone, and then you drop it out, and the ball just sits on the floor in your ramp zone. The opponent can't go in there, else they get penalties. You corral them there, and then you pick them up and you go score.
Well, there is where is our big ball holding rule? Because I thought I worded that better, but maybe I didn't.
Is there like a clause against that?
I think so, but I'm gonna double check what I actually wrote. Because I definitely I did think of this, but I may have wrote it poorly, so we're gonna find out. Yeah, so it says holding a ball against a field element, so I may need to limit that to include the ramp zones or something. So there's some version where you have to be limited. Yeah, as long as you're not completely holding it against a field element, currently it's not illegal. So yes, there may be a way to very much reduce the number of big balls the opponent could have. But as soon as they go score them though, they wouldn't be able to do that. So it would be, yeah, there's some weird.
No, it's just that they can up their 6 holding by just leaving it inside of their ramp zone of like whenever a robot comes by, you just let the ball hit you and then it just sits there. And then the other robot can't get it. Yeah.
Yeah, so they can't get it without intentionally taking a foul currently. Because they could go and get 2 balls and take a foul, and then you'd have 2 balls for 5 points. So that is a weird intentional foul thing that we tried to say we wouldn't discuss, but it does exist at the moment. So that is something we may need to plug in some version of this game. Okay, so what did we talk about? We talked about that one. We talked about stopping them from crossing midfield back to their goal side. The one Felipe talked about. And then hoarding balls, potentially small or big balls. In their ramp zone. Interesting concept. Okay, yeah, so that is a thing they could do, which could lock down the game in a weird way.
Can we play defense in auto?
There is a rule for that. Somewhere. During auto, no defense. So during auto, a robot's bumpers may not completely cross the speed bump. So you are allowed to be like, so if you start here, you're allowed to come onto the speed bump and get balls. You're allowed to have some portion of your speed bump on, or portion of your bumpers on top of this section, even if you started over here. But you're not allowed to completely exit the speed bump, basically. So all 6 robots kind of have the speed bump in common during auto. So if all of them are there, they could be hitting each other, but you can't cross to the other side of the field and hit somebody.
Oh, but they start on the side where the goal is.
They start on the side of their goal, yeah. So the 3 blue
Okay.
robots start on this side.
Okay,
3
I was like,
red
how are we
robots
gonna
start
shoot?
on this side.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What are our other questions? So this is another tricky question. Should each robot work independently to score points, or are there ways you can work together? Something similar to like one robot scores hatches, the other scores cargo. Anyone have ideas in their head, concepts of how robots could work together to score points?
I guess a weird feeding thing where someone is like sitting at the goal and then they just get fed. But that's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely what this is talking about, though, right? So like we've had kind of games like this before. 14, you kind of had to work together, but there was a like 900 tried to have like what they called like there was like a chokehold death cycle, whatever you want to call it, where there's one robot that just kind of gets positioned somewhere where the other team can't touch them, and then as long as their partners can throw them game objects, they can turn those into points, right? So kind of what you were talking about, you could either, if you're a red robot, we could park here. You can park anywhere in your ramp zone, right? You could park on the ramp if you wanted to. You could park anywhere in your ramp zone, and then you're kind of reliant on your partners to shoot balls or launch balls towards you. You then take them in from either behind you or you turn around or something, and somehow you then launch them into the goal. So there could possibly be some way that you could do that from the feeder too. So you could try to like have a feeder robot that's here and you're just shooting balls down some stream. A defender could come in and like interrupt that though. So there is some version of a parked shooter robot that gets fed by its partners, right? Something like that. I don't know what's happening there. Okay. Oh, thank you. That's what I was trying to do and it didn't delete. How is, okay. Is this the order we want to do things in? I feel like this is not the order we want to do things in. What time is it? Yeah, it's already 5:30. Let's skip to 11 so we can look at this before a lot of people have to go. So you all should have a spreadsheet in your classroom that you have your own version of. So basically the way this works is I put this together today, so this may have some errors, but I think it's right. Basically the green cells are cells you edit. The red cells are just point values from the game. And the blue cells are all calculated. So they have formulas in there to get the answers out, okay? So basically you have small balls up top, big balls below, and you say how many cycles would you think they're doing per match? So you can kind of set whatever cycle number you want. So say we switch it, we're only doing 6 small ball cycles because we think small balls are harder to get. Oh, these should be blue. These cells below it tell you like how much time per cycle you have. If you give it how many seconds you want to cycle, so this should be green. Because you could change this, right? Like 135 is the entirety of driver control. You can start subtracting some stuff for end game, right? Say we think it's going to take 15 seconds to do the end game, so we can make that 120 instead. And now if we're doing 6 small ball cycles, it takes us 20 seconds per cycle. These are completely independent, so this is assuming you're doing one, like you're just doing small balls or you're just doing big balls. If you wanted to combine them, you could like cut out how many cycles you were doing a little bit to figure that out. Over here in this middle column, it's how many small balls per cycle you're doing. And then big balls, I assume you're doing 2 balls per cycle. And then you get your percentages of shots you think are going into a specific goal. So what this is going to end up calculating is what's called expected value if you've had statistics class. So like you may get weird things like decimal points, which don't exist in, like, this isn't an example of an actual match per se. This is what you kind of expected to get during any time you did this run, because your balls wouldn't actually be able to split up this way, because for 2 balls you can't have a third of them go into the lower, a third go into the outer, and a third go into the inner. There's only 2. But if you do that over enough cycles, you could have a third of your balls kind of do that or have that percentage. So you should be able to play with the percentage. These are in no way right. These just add up to 100. I made them as equal as I could. I don't think this would be what the actual percentages would be, right? So part of this is how do we kind of change these numbers and figure out what makes the most sense to focus on. Some of this in a real situation, we'd have to figure out how to eventually build prototypes, right? We need to know, okay, how hard is it to actually make small balls in the top goal? How hard is it to make big balls in the inner goal? We don't know some of those things. So some of this is we have to kind of guess and use experience and just kind of say, okay, we think it's going to be this difficult to figure out. Okay, so the point of having that and kind of what we want to do is one of the ones we want to answer on kickoff is because we're trying to be a very good team at any of the games we're playing. So ideally we want to be close to elite or elite. But also what that means is different for most games than most people think. So I defined a rough idea of elite. These numbers aren't perfect. I didn't scout every match clearly. But it's a rough based on what some old scouting data has, scouting data from our divisions at champs from all these years. Roughly 50-ish robots per year. In 2016, we're able to score 5+ boulders, which doesn't seem like that much, but when you actually start getting to like consistently doing 5+ and not just like being able to max out at that, it's a pretty small group of teams that could do it, where they were just every match hitting 5, where like their max might be 7 or 8, but they were very rarely going below 5 was a very small number. There were a lot of teams who could max out at 6 or max out at maybe even 7 sometimes, but their average was probably closer to 4. And there just weren't a lot of teams who were really averaging 5. Same with gears. Gears in 17 are a little weird because there was not incentive to keep scoring. So there were probably more that could do 5. And if they were just always scoring, they probably could. But because you had this other like ball task, you had some other things, 5 is still about right. There's probably elite might be 6, but they just weren't scoring that many all the time. They just didn't have to. 2019, it's roughly people who could like pretty consistently get to 12. Like our robot could max at 13, 14 on occasion. I think we did it a couple times or maybe once. I don't remember. But we weren't doing much more than that. And there were a lot of matches where we weren't scoring 12 game pieces. Where the very elite teams, it would be pretty shocking if they didn't score 12 that season. Or it was a much more rare occurrence for them not to score 12. So that gives you some idea of kind of like how many cycles people were able to do. These games are definitely different though, right? So in 17, to score a gear, you had to run all the way across the field and come all the way back. In 16, you had to go climb a defense, get a ball, climb another defense, come back and score it. 19, you're doing basically quarter field cycles back and forth. In this game, we definitely have potentially faster cycles, right? What are some of the quicker cycles we could do in this game? So if our red robot, assuming we're shooting from somewhere over here, and our red robot launches its balls into the goal, where is it getting its game pieces from, potentially? Anybody?
I'd say the same side from the feeder, because it'd be tough to go all the way back past the speed bump.
So yeah, so you could you could drive over the speed bump, but like there's possibly just balls hanging out in this area, right? Like all these balls roll down from the ramp here. There's potentially like some amount of balls that people may have shot towards the goal, but like they hit off a sidewall and roll back. You may not have to drive very far to get your next balls. There could be balls just all around you that you can pick up and score, right? Where else? How do big balls return back to the field?
People can throw them.
Yeah, so if our robot's here, our human player's down at this side, a human player could launch the big ball in front of our robot, right? They could hit it off this driver station and our robot could go get it. They could launch it into our robot if we had a way to catch them. There's a lot of ways that we could get a couple big balls faster than having to drive all the way back down. So you could potentially do some very fast cycles that way. Small balls are going to be all over the field because even if they come dumped out of here, once a robot drives through, they get pushed all over the place. We can find if people have not watched a lot of 2017 matches that had a lot of fuel, 2017, Houston, Einstein, FRC, there were a lot of, those are really bad camera angles. St. Louis Einstein had better camera angles. I think they had some decent. So yeah, so you can see all the balls. So there's about 500 balls, a little bit more than that on this field too, once all the hoppers are hit. So quite a few of them are in robots, but you can see what 500 balls looks like. It's not that many. Like there's a lot of floor space still, clearly. As the balls get scored, there's less balls on the field. So I think there's actually probably only like 400 or so on here, but they end up quite a bit to the edges. But you can kind of see what that many balls sort of looks like, though. Okay. Anyone have kind of suggestions for what some of these numbers should be for things to think about, comparisons? They don't have to be correct because we don't know what correct is. We're all just guessing.
The percentages should definitely change.
Okay. So let's start over here. What do we think for? Are we okay with these for right now as our cycles? Do we assume small ball cycles will be slower than big ball cycles? Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the only time that's not true is there's potential that like if you have like either the hoarding of big balls or they're going to be fewer of them, so it may be longer paths to go get them on occasion. But in general, I think your big ball cycle is going to be quite a bit faster. So saying it's 5 seconds faster is reasonable. It may even be faster than that. But we don't have to edit that too much right now. Okay, so where are we on percentages? So there is some, if we're lining up to shoot a small ball, right? Some of them you can always miss, because if you just miss the ring entirely, there's going to be some percentage that either always miss or it could be zero, but if you're just really good, but there's always a chance for it to miss. It's going to be rare to both hit inner goal, outer goal, and top goal. Does that make sense, right? Because like they're in two very different spots. So if you're aiming for the top goal, you're probably not putting too many into the inner. Like some of them may bounce around and go in the outer. We don't know. We'd have to figure out how that plays with like physics and everything. But I think if we're starting to hit any sort of good percentage of top goal, we're probably not hitting very many inner and probably not hitting very many outer. And any of our misses are probably just true misses. If we're shooting for the inner and outer goals, you're probably, ideally, I don't think you're hitting any top goals because that's just that's a crazy error. Like the amount of like off you have to be to accidentally shoot one really far. And that accurate seems very odd. So, and then also we have the question of how many small balls do we think we can actually fire per cycle? Anyone have ideas for what numbers they'd want to compare? Or if they have their own sheet open and they want to share screen, we can do that too.
Interesting.
You try putting small balls per cycle down to 15.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, ideally it'd be 15 to 20 because we try and hold what 10 in auto. So you probably want a little more than that. So 15 to 20 would be reasonable.
Sure. So you can definitely do that. So that's a potential thing. I'm trying to figure out. So what do we need to know about the past? So when in 2017, when they dumped, who's a good example? 16, 19, 20. So when they dumped the hoppers in 2017, 50 balls came out and went into robots. There's a scene with them doing it somewhere in here. Where did they start shooting? Okay, there we go. So we do have this 18-inch rule, so we have to figure out, and we're going to ground collect everything, but it's more just like questioning how many. So, right, so that's 50 balls dumping into here. So 15 is a relatively small number.
Yeah.
I don't think they had other. Oh, that's just confusing. Okay, that's the only shot they had in that one. It's the 118 reveal that they have like they put like all the balls in, right? Do some crazy number.
Will we be holding big balls at the same time?
Potentially, but you can do that. But there's no rule about big balls being above 18 inches, right? So like you can do that wherever you want. So this is some crazy number. I don't know what. I don't remember if it was actually 118 balls. I don't think they did that because that seems like way too many. Now that I think about it, but yeah, like they put a ton of balls. So even if you cut this off at 18 inches, let's see what we can get to. Right, so bumpers are about 6. So if you do another bumper stack and another bumper stack, right, that's your 18-inch line is like way up there. So there's a decent number of balls inside that robot. Right, if we assume like that's that gold thing right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's way more than 15. I don't know how many it is, but it's way more than 15.
That looks like 40, 45.
I don't know if
118 doesn't seem that unreasonable, actually. It could be 118 in there.
it could be. I don't know that it is. Okay, we can see what happens when they actually dump a hopper in, so they can see. So these are the starter balls. You started with 10, I believe. I think it was the same number in 2017. There should be 50 in each one of these hoppers. They do shoot at the same time, so it's a little harder to tell. Oh, and they don't actually ever even fill up, right? Oh, so that one they get closer to. Yeah, I don't know. 118 seems like a lot, but because if they're only designed to take a single hoppers width, which is 50, and like maybe a little more, I can't imagine they're taking double that. Right? That seems scaled the other way. If someone said it was closer to like 60, 70, maybe I think we're probably closer. Even then, that's quite a bit more. is that? But yeah, so that's one of those things we can play with in CAD and try to figure out if you take a 5-inch ball and if you had a nice grid of some sort, how would you pack them under 18 inches? Okay, but the main idea here is I was thinking that this number could get bigger depending on how fast you're intaking and things. Because if this number starts getting up to, like, I don't think 30 is unreasonable. I think there's might be even a bit more than that depending on how you build things, right? But then the question is, how do we play with the percentages, right? Are we missing a third of our balls? Probably not by some point, right? There's a bunch of other like little things we have to start eventually playing with. Like if you send a stream of balls out, do they ever run into each other, right? Like does one ball slow down more than another and then you like hit each other and diverge? Things that, just as we're coming up on where I know some people are gonna have to leave, what happens if like multiple people are shooting at the same time? Do those streams of balls hit each other? What other there's a bunch of tricky concepts that I haven't fully thought out in any way. I just know they've been brought up while we've been doing game design. So yeah, trying to figure out percentages is definitely tricky, so we have to play with what these are. So even if we're only missing like 10 of our shots, this blue number's down here just so you can force everything to get to 100. So this would get to like 40 and 40. Nope, that's not how math works. 45 and 45. That's what I meant to type. Okay. So if you limit this down to only 10% misses on 30 ball cycles, and you do 6 of them, you can hit 243, which is a lot of points. If you change this down to where maybe you're only hitting 5 in the lower goal, so now you're doing 47 and 40. What is that? 40. Yeah. You're getting closer in points once you start up in your inner and middle goal percentages for the big balls. If you're doing 8 cycles, if you can push that, if you do 9 cycles, you immediately start doing more. And these are comparisons of just big ball versus small ball. There's also some comparison where you combine these and you figure out how to do both of them, right? So there's some, okay, what if we're doing 6 and 6, and every time we do a small ball cycle, we're also doing a big ball cycle. Now we're getting both of these double points, right? But maybe we have to do fewer balls when we do that, but you still come out ahead compared to doing one or the other. But then can you be as accurate? Figuring out that trade-off is definitely a tricky problem. And maybe we're not as good here. Maybe we're only doing 40 here and doing 55 there. Now you get a few less points. So yeah, so the basic idea is you can play with this and start figuring out how do we build something that maximizes our points for this game, right? What strategy maximizes our points for this game? Really?
We know what that means.
Seriously.
I'm gonna be Kathleen.
Hey,
Kathleen, what up?
Okay, back to the game. Back to this game, not the other game. Okay. It's like my phone wouldn't let me mute it. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so figuring out what an elite score will be is going to be tricky. Just looking at this, right? If you can knock this down to like 5 cycles and 5 cycles, and you're already hitting close to 250 or so just in teleop. So you could figure out there's some way to hit some scores close to that probably, plus your auto, plus your climb. So like individual robots might be doing some crazy number, right? This is trying to score 100 balls though, 20 in 5 cycles, which does seem like a lot. But they're a lot easier to score than the 2017 balls where you had to launch them and get them into a relatively small goal and everything. Okay. So that is definitely something to think about, and we'll probably come back to that next Tuesday. We definitely want to know the answer to that, or if somebody has thoughts, we can start figuring more of that out. Some of the other ones that we haven't gone through are kind of what are the various strategy options. These are definitely ones we're gonna have to think a lot more through. I don't want to start going into them too much, but there's going to be quite a few. This one we can answer relatively quickly. How is Auton different from driver control? This is mostly asking about like point values. So we know the ring goal points are doubled, right?
Yeah.
Points are doubled. Small balls in low goal are worth 1.
Oh, they're not doubled for big balls, the ring ones.
Oh, they're not doubled. You're right.
They're
Right.
not.
Yep.
Only in
Small goal ball, small ring goal, small ball points.
On small, everything's doubled, except we'll tell you out there's no logo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. But ring goal is it not top ring? Is it top goal? What do we name it?
No, it's top ring.
Okay, I thought so.
He just means everything named as a ring is doubled.
Yeah. There are 3 ring goals and a lower goal.
Yes.
We did that on purpose. No, it's fine. It was super confusing when we named it when we did game design. we tried really hard to figure out whether it should be top goal or top ring, and there was a whole debate. I think the reason the debate won was so we could have these ring goal thing as a category.
I don't think it was a debate. I think it was just like you and I making decisions.
That's what I'm talking about. But it was like the debate between ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like we were just like figuring out why one was better than the other. What is? Oh yeah, big balls are worth more in the ring. Worth more in the ring. 5 inner, 10 outer, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Nope, other way around.
Yes. I'm over here agreeing. Like,
yeah,
yes.
I'm like, wait, that doesn't. I was like, something doesn't look right there. I wrote something very wrong. Maximizing outer goal or autonomous points is what?
How much do you start with again?
Oh, so I don't necessarily mean what the number is. I mean how, like, just what do we end up having to do to maximize auto points? So you start with 10 and you start with 1 big ball. Start 10 small balls, 1 big ball. So to maximize those points, you clearly are probably scoring all those balls, right?
Yes.
So score all starting balls. Then you can also, how else can you score more points?
Moving off initiation line.
The initiation.
Sure. We let's assume we always move off initiation line. that is the least important way that we score in auto, because ideally we should be doing that no matter what. Okay, what are the other ways to score?
You can go pick up the big balls.
Yeah, more big balls, right? More big balls from the speed bump. So that's the important one. So that's like the Auton interesting bit that we would be watching at like Einstein is which path do people take and which big balls are they going for? There are 12 big balls. So in theory, all 6 robots could get 2 because 12 divided by 6 is 2. But you have to all in Auton like select which ones you're going for, or are you able to do more than 2 extra? Are you able to like shoot all the ones you start with, grab 2, shoot those, grab 2 more, shoot those? Like how many more could you actually shoot? And then the other one is where do you score the small balls, right? and the big ball too. So,
Right.
but more important, those small balls potentially are more important when you have an 8 in the top goal.
Yeah.
Like that, there's a potential for 80 points with just your starter balls if you can manage to get all 10 of them into the top ring. But that could be nullified if you can get a lot more, if you can somehow score a lot more big balls in the inner ring. Like if you could score 3 big balls in the inner ring in the same time it takes to figure this out, it's not worth it, right? So there's definitely different strategies there. Have we mentioned feeding earlier? We didn't talk about Auton feeding at all. In theory, somebody could give you their small balls, so you could have more small balls in auto.
Seems really complicated.
Wait, can you hold more than 10 in auto?
You can only start with 10. As soon as Auton starts, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, like if you missed a ball or.
I see.
Or if you're just like, you could start touching another robot and they could spit out their 10 and you pick them up, right? You can literally start bumper to bumper with somebody.
Yeah. So theoretically, you could have 30 small balls at one time.
Correct. If you get all 10 from both of your partners, yes.
Yeah.
But it does require them to have a way that like is compatible with you to do that, right? They have to be able to dump them out, which is relatively easy because if they can hold small balls, they probably can shoot them across, launch them across the floor, right? Probably. I don't know why they just hold them for the fun of it and just like run around with balls inside the robot, but maybe I would not. That somebody will do that. If there's 4,000 teams, one of them will just run around with balls they can't score. But yeah, they have to figure out whether that's your strategy or going to get the big balls, because you could do something where someone spits their 10 at you and then they go get big balls, right? Maybe they give you all 10 and a big ball, and now you have 20 and 2 big balls, and they just go and get other big balls off the speed bump to score. There's a lot of ways you could plan for things, but a lot of that is some amount of risk in that you have to have a partner that can do it, right? So a lot of what we want to do is maximize it. If we assume nobody else showed up on the field, how do we maximize our score so we're in control as much as we can be? Okay, we knocked off those. Okay, so here's where we start getting into more kind of robot specific and not necessarily like we shouldn't be talking about exactly what wheels we're using yet or anything like that, right? We don't need those kind of details. But more, what are the efficient strategies? So if we were building an everybot, basically, how would they play the game? What uses the least amount of like thought resources, skill resources, material resources to score, to get the most amount of points? And all these are guesses, right? We don't have prototypes, so we're just kind of intuitive guessing / debating, arguing, whatever we want to do.
I guess like intake and then just reverse to shoot it out and then pew. So it's like
that makes sense.
Double intake.
So your shooter and your intake are the same thing. That seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
What game objects are they playing that with? Are they figuring out how to do everything? Are they just doing big balls? Are they just doing small balls?
I would say just small balls. That seems easier.
Just small balls. Interesting.
Or well, doing both is definitely harder, but like
no, doing both is definitely interesting. I'm more interested by your pick of small balls over big balls.
Well, because I feel like you can hold more, and you have to do like it's less cycles, so it's like easier. Wait, hold on. Let me take this through.
I'm interested. This is interesting. Intuitively, I would have guessed the other way, but I haven't done the math yet either. So I mean, you would have to put up, well, like, so even here, right? So like five big balls in 5 cycles of 2 big balls each, you get more points than doing small balls, unless you're able to be really accurate, right?
Yeah. And that's doing a lot. That's 5 cycles, 20 balls.
That's 5 cycles of 20, right? Which does seem like
I
5 cycles of 20 balls seems harder to me than 5 cycles of 2 balls.
Yeah. Okay,
Of
I
big
agree.
balls.
I don't know
Well,
why.
and the other reason why I think the big balls are nice is that you also have a lot of error because you get points for the lower goal. So if your team's not super, if you're not tuned in, right? If you're not like everything's running perfectly, you can still get points no matter what, as long as you're just shoving balls up. Where the small balls are definitely a little trickier.
Oh, because if you miss, you get 0?
Yeah,
Oh,
if you miss, you get 0 on the small balls, right? If you don't get a lower goal, like there's no lower goal for the small balls in Teleop.
Ow.
Yeah, so in my like intuition phase, I definitely think that the big balls make more sense. Because you can also, because the human players can also just throw them downfield to you too.
That's true.
There's potentially very fast cycles, or at least recovery cycles, right? Is like as soon as they score, you can get the ball thrown back to you. But it becomes interesting at, yeah, so I think that's more efficient. Then the question is, what do you do for the climb? What's like the resource? Is there a bunch of value in an everybot trying to do the full climb, or does it make sense just to figure out how to high park? Like, are those 30 points that much more valuable?
Well,
Did you say high park initially?
I did, but now I'm thinking about it.
I think
feel
high
like,
park is I think there's a reasonable argument for high park.
Yeah.
Right, like there seems like in my mind there'd be some, we've ran through it a little bit because we've played with the game for longer, but there's some relatively simple ways to, what just happened? All right, SolidWorks. We didn't need that field barrier anyway. Okay, so kind of when we were designing it, kind of from the beginning, we always assumed there'd be some way to like latch, like you would just be able to drive in with something that is like on your robot, and it just grabs this bar, kind of like hooks over, and then you just stay there. So that seems relatively easy. There's a non-trivial chance that you could just like drive up and get your front wheels above the ramp and just like hang your front wheels down into this like no man's area, and then you're just like stuck. So we don't know that works, but I think that works. You may not have to do anything. Like I think just like a kit bot might be able to high park if it can. It should be able to drive up this probably if it gets some speed and like ramps itself. So assuming you build a robot that can drive up the ramp, I think you can high park relatively easily.
Like you could also do like similar to this year's every bot climb. If you like angle it somehow, just like hook on there from the ground.
Yeah, so you would just like drive up somehow, and then have a way to hook, then have a way to extend your everybot hookup.
Yeah. Or theoretically, like even from the ground, you don't have to drive up. You could just extend.
Oh no! You cannot, because you can. Yeah, so you can never extend. Remember, so there's height limits, right? We wrote those down.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so there's only, what is it? Never extend above 6 feet high, right? So from the base of your robot sitting flat on the floor, like parallel to your bumpers, to your tallest extension can never be more than 6 feet. But you're allowed to extend horizontally. So that means, and the goal, or this bar is 8 feet. So you can't be down here and just extend up and grab this bar, right? You have to be basically on the ramp, and then you can extend kind of out and up to grab the bar.
So you're basically high parked already, and then you have to climb.
Not
This is all-
necessarily. Not necessarily. So you could also you can be on the ground, extend sort of out and up, and then drive in, latch the bar, and pick yourself up, right? Before being actually stuck on the ramp. Like you could do it dynamically if you want, right? Because part of the reason why you can't ever extend above 6 feet is that this bar is like 6'3" or so. I'd have to measure it exactly, but we didn't want people running into this piece. Also, we wanted people to have to use the ramp. Like it's the point of the game. So yeah, so you could probably build some sort of relatively easy hook climb thing that drives up and then does it, but the high park seems rather simple, so there's probably almost certainly a way to high park. So for now, we can do. I don't know what just happened. It got all over the place. Okay. Big balls and high park. There's probably some way to do that, right? There's some way to do that efficiently. Okay. This question is somewhat similar, but a little different because this question assumes that instead of the every bot, and we're assuming like everybody's going to have to build this robot, we are assuming we're going to build a robot, right? So we have all of our resources, we have all of our experience, and we're basically saying, okay, if we had to compete next Saturday, right? Assume we didn't have school, say it was like over spring break or something, and we had not planned anything, but we have to compete in a week. What are the things that it's mostly basically like ideas, what are the things we know we could get to work? Right? What are the things that have very little risk in not ever working, if that makes sense?
Not ever
Not ever failing. Sorry, not ever failing.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So like, what are the things that we're like, we know we could do this and we can figure out a way to get it right, and it wouldn't take that much time, right? It's not going to be perfect. We're competing in a week. Our robot's not going to be that great, but it are things that we're like, okay, with our resources, we could do a little bit more because we can definitely do more than what Everybot could, right? Like Everybot was built in about a week. We can do more than that and still make it pretty good. In a week's time. Like we don't have to do any of the documentation they do. They don't have to do any of the other work they do. We don't have $1,000 cap. We can throw money and resources at it. So we can buy like a bunch of COTS parts. We can anything like that. We can get in and on easily. I mean, there are no wrong answers here. So like, just whatever people.
I feel like we could get a way to do high park in a week. For sure.
High park. I mean, we already talked about the Everybot doing that, right? We think you can do it with just a drivetrain. So like, I'm very confident we can do high park.
I think we could have.
But do you think so? What's the case against us being able to climb in a week?
Would we? I mean, it'd be hard to already have a consistent shooter by then.
So like the climb task though is one of the potential easier ones, right? We're building another elevator. We built elevators. We built tons of elevators, right? Like,
yeah.
Take this year's elevator, make it slightly longer, put it at an angle, like, like we can look and see exactly what that looks like, but it's not that much taller. Once you're up here, if you kind of look at where the furthest point of your robot is, it's not that much of an extension to grab this. I think it's only like 2-ish feet from like the starting box. I'd have to look again. It may be a little bit more than that, but basically it's basically an angled elevator. Once you are high parked, it's basically a slightly angled elevator to grab this bar, and you have to figure out a way to not be like release yourself, or at least be able to like pivot up to where your bumpers are above this line. But I'm pretty confident we could climb in a week, and that's a pretty good amount of points to do that, right? Like, being able to do that, it helps potentially with the RP. Like, that's one of those ones where like, yeah, once we lay out the kind of the CAD for it, I don't think it's gonna. We're pretty confident we can make it work, and it not be a place where we're like, oh, we need to tune all of this forever, and we need way more than a week to get it to work. Other ideas?
I was thinking earlier about like the getting 2 balls off the speed bump, like without having to pivot. Like we figured that out like this year pretty decently. So I don't think
having a wide enough intake to get 2 balls. Yeah, so like 2 ball wide intake, and it's fewer balls too. We're not having to worry about like 5 balls holding. We just have to like get 2 balls to line up, which is pretty easy probably. Other things we think we could do in a week? Yeah, because like a 2 ball wide intake is literally like a version of this pastures intake that is slightly bigger, right? Like if we really wanted to, you can bring 2 balls over a bumper with those 2 rollers almost certainly. May not even need 2. You can probably do it with 1 because the ball's bigger, so it's easier to roll over the bumper.
I answer?
What's up? Sure.
Can I?
Sure. We're
How
into the
about-
time with it. Everybody can do stuff.
How about a drivetrain?
That is a good answer. Good.
I feel like that's the first answer.
Family Feud style good answer. Yes, we would build a drivetrain. Whether that it would not be custom sheet metal, right? It's probably either a kit drive or a West Coast like Versa drive, one of those two. Or if we had a drive that we could get done really fast, we could do that too. Like if we knew laser could come back fast enough, we could do a custom one. We could probably do our own if we wanted to too, but it'd be weird. Like we could route our own or something too. Ooh, thinking of router, I need to talk to some people. I don't know when that's coming in. Okay, so yes, drivetrain, very important answer. Definitely the first thing. I assume we all assumed we'd be driving. Drivetrain, climb. I definitely think we could do a 2 ball wide intake. There's a way to do that relatively easily with the boulders. I don't think it would be that crazy to get them to not jam all the time. So yeah, I think the real question becomes at that point, so we know if we're picking up 2 of the big balls, we know we're going to launch out the big ball too, right? So we're going to have some sort of big ball launcher as well. Then the question becomes, do you play with small balls or not? And if you do, to what extent?
As in, like, are they their own mechanism?
Potentially, or also like, so there's one thing we haven't discussed yet. So like there were teams in 2017 that had very specific small ball that had ball mechanisms that all they did was score balls in auto. Right? They just started with those 10. They had no way to intake balls, but they could score those 10 balls. So you could build something similar to that, right? Where all you do is you launch those 10 balls into, like, you try to get them into the center or the inner and outer rings. And that's like your whole auto task is you fire your big ball, then you fire those 10 small balls after it. But you don't intake small balls. So like that's something you could even probably add to the everybot at some point as like a extra feature or something later on if people wanted to like improve on it. Because potentially it's not very much, right? It's like a tube and like a wheel at the end, and it just spins out balls.
I think Sunny brought up a good point earlier of the climb of doing the high park
versus doing the climb.
Yeah, versus doing the climb.
If we only had 1 week, is that what you're saying?
Or
just in general?
No. I think in general. But if it is in general, at the very least, if it is 1 week, I think Sunny's right. of focusing on the intake, the ball stuff, and then you just have this, your wheels get stuck, or you have this passive latch thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not spending your resource on it. Yeah, and so that may be a way we're misphrasing the question, right? So like the question was more about how can we do things that we know are gonna work more than what we'd actually do in a week. Does that make sense?
Oh.
Okay.
But like
okay.
that's partly my fault in how I phrased the question. Because I think we can be pretty confident that the climb can work, especially if we had more than a week. Doing
So
it
it's
in a
more
week
like-
is probably rough. But it's more like the idea here, Ethan, or like specifically, was more to get like the what would 2056 do, but in like a different way, right? Like
okay.
we're very confident this mechanism will work once it's designed even remotely well, right? There's no like we don't have to invent anything to do it, and I don't think you have to invent anything to climb. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's more of
Okay.
like a what could you build, and less of like super strategically and
Yeah.
analyzing everything.
Yeah, this was
Yeah,
more just
okay.
like way to get people to think about that without having to kind of go through what I just had to go through anyway, because we
sense.
did
That makes
it
sense.
because I didn't ask it very well. So I may change this question in future kickoffs. But yeah, it's more of the what problems do we not have to solve? Like what problems do we not have to make a unique solution to that we know we can play the game? And so I agree. I think this list is probably pretty close because anything you do with the small balls outside of maybe like an Auton small ball launcher where it's just those 10 things coming out of a tube is relatively new. Because once you have to sort and figure out how to feed those small balls back into a launcher, it's going to take invention and like prototyping and design, right? Like there's a lot of places to look at. There's a lot of 2017 robots that did it. So it doesn't have to be completely new, but there's definitely some amount of newness, plus trying to figure out an intake that possibly does small and big balls somehow, right? Like different rollers, and one goes up and one goes under or something, whatever it is. There's probably a lot that goes into having to do both balls. I think coming back to this question a little bit after we talked about these, do the elite robots, like the top 50ish robots, do all of them have small ball launchers?
I would say so. Yes. Oh wow! Like in general, or like in this week?
No, in general. Like this is back to just like Einstein level, the people winning their division at champs.
I would say so. Yeah.
I would say so too. I think the small ball task here is easier than the small ball task in 17. I think also because you're aiming, because when you aim, you're already aimed. Potentially, you're aimed for your small and big balls. I think that's part of the easier task, right? It's not like a whole separate task like it was in 17, where you were hanging gears and you were nowhere near where you wanted to be to shoot small balls or to shoot fuel. Where here, if you can intake those small balls while you're doing other things, there's not nearly as big of a time penalty to also launch those balls. Like it's almost just always bonus points if you can do it, even if you're not focused on it. First released a whole thing. Interesting. Okay, there's apparently a new safety manual with, okay, cool. Okay. Good to know. I think this is probably close, something like that. Other questions we can hit before everybody has to go soon. This one gets weird, and I don't even know if we can get to, I don't know if we can actually answer this yet, but kind of what do the third robots do is a really tricky question for this game, and I think it's a tricky question for every game, as we've come to learn. Like, I don't know if we, on Kickoff of 2020, I don't know how close I think my idea of what would have been a third at Champs was different than it ended up being. I probably would have thought there would have been some amount of defense, and now my guess is in the 2020-2021 Infinite Recharge game that the third is not playing basically almost any defense. So similar thought to this game. What do we think thirds do at the different levels of play?
I mean, I don't know if this should be second or third, but maybe a feeder robot. Just one that just purely feeds the other side with.
The other side. Interesting. So it would almost certainly be third, right? Like, in general, we're assuming our top 1 and 2 are playing a relatively similar offensive strategy. They kind of had to design to be able to intake balls themselves during quals because otherwise they're not going to win very many matches in quals if they're relying on their partners to feed them, right? Like those like kind of alternate feed strategies we briefly mentioned can exist, but they're very risky unless you can also do the rest of the game. Like the intaking strategy. So what does the feed... So are you saying the feed bot is more important than defense?
I just don't think that defense is going to be that effective in this game mode.
Interesting.
Because like I think it's much easier than other game modes to get around it. I mean, you can come from basically any angle and still get
into the ramp zone. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Because let's say you go from an alternate angle, you can still get it in without being straight on.
Oh, you're talking about like shooting at it or like just driving into your ramp zone?
Yeah. No, driving in.
Driving into your ramp zone and then parking and being able to like shoot the ball from somewhere in here. Not parking, but I mean like getting up here somewhere and shooting the...
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't think that'll be too tough, to be honest.
Huh.
There's just so...
I don't know. I think there's like a defense bot like camping there. It'll be hard to get around them. Or even like if it takes them, like even if they can still get around them pretty easily, but like the 2 seconds maybe lost is probably more valuable than like the 20 balls they can feed.
Yeah, because the problem with like at a district level competition is your feeding requires them to have a good intake, and at that point, especially a feeding task in this game, if they're good enough to be able to intake balls and shoot them across the floor, why are they not just scoring?
Yeah,
right. Like that is the scoring task, right? Like, so I worry that like it's gonna be really weird to feed if it is literally the scoring task. Like there's no real difference other than like velocity control. On the scoring task and the feeding task. So yes, but if like goalie defense we don't think is that important, maybe there is some midfield slow down your ball collection defense, right? Because you can defend the other side of it, not defend the score, but defend them intaking balls is a different play, right? But maybe all of it doesn't matter. Maybe everyone, because the scoring task is so relatively easy, right? If you can intake, you can probably score something, right? Even if you can't aim, if you can grab a big ball, you can shove it up the ramp. Maybe they're just always scoring. I do think there's somewhat of a limited issue with that, in that you do have to figure out how to share the one goal, right? We discussed earlier, if all 3 red robots are trying to push balls up this ramp, they're probably not going where they told them to go, right? They're gonna run into each other and things, which is a little scary.
What's the length of like the box? That's a bad way to put it.
Yeah, tell me what you're talking about.
The place where the opposing robots can't go. What's it?
Oh, the ramp zone.
The ramp zone.
Yeah. Like this line, basically, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
125 inches, so like 12 feet.
12 feet. Okay.
So yeah, so that's a lot. That is a lot to defend.
Yeah.
Right? You figure your robot's only like a little over 3 feet long, so you have 2/3 of your width at all times. Yeah, so
that's a lot bigger than I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
But so what happened? But so what's the risk if you don't have somebody here? If you don't have somebody defending their goal, can the opponents just like start shooting from further away?
Yeah, 'cause yeah.
Right? Like if you just open this up, can they just like drive across, get to like this point, and just start chucking?
Well, that's why if you have a midfield bot, you can just kind of control where they can go. It's relatively the same amount of space that they'd have as if they played a goalie bot.
Well, I mean, you have the whole cross field, which is 18 feet, right? So it's a little
Yeah.
bit more. But yeah, so because you have 12 here, you just bounce back and forth here. They have 18. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and messing up the midfield, you do get this weirdness of them having to come over the speed bump. Yeah, the midfield defense makes some sense. So if your third at district is playing some form of midfield defense, maybe they're like pushing balls into your blue zone from the red zone. Or maybe they're not feeding, but they're just trying to force balls back into the zone where you can get them easier than their opponents. Because I'm not sure how effective this zone is, but maybe it might be for some people. But there is some other version of a midfielder that makes sense.
Especially because the speed bump slows them down so much, it'd be a lot harder to get around that. They'd have to get around.
Right, yeah, unless they're just trying to. We aren't entirely sure if teams aren't just gonna like Dukes of Hazard this and just like.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's just yeet right onto other defender robots. Like that could be a problem. The other thing we briefly discussed, I think Ethan brought up, is you can post your third kind of somewhere in this range to keep balls in your ramp zone. So as you're dumping back, if you don't want your opponents to get small balls or potentially big balls, you keep one of your robots to kind of hoard balls into here, which we have to figure out what the ruling is on that and if that's against the rules. Currently it's not, so we're gonna assume it's not against the rules. This could be like a team update week 1 where we decide to pull an HQ and dramatically alter the game in the middle of the season. So
what if the robot does that? Or rather, when it's what if that robot, because the opponent's goal is like right across, it's like right there. So
right.
What if they're like playing towards the goal and like towards midfield? But when a robot's not there, they just kind of go back and then camp and then get the balls lined up.
They force those balls to stay kind of in this side. They push balls back into the zone and they come back and defend a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is some so if you have a good enough defender, they can probably do that. And the further away they are from this line, the fewer fouls they're going to get too. Right? So if they're playing defense out in like kind of this zone, they are less likely to get a foul, because right now if you're playing on this line and somebody shoves you in, it's still 5 points for the other person, which kind of defeats your defense.
I mean, if someone's like if an opponent robot is like on the line or they're like barely over the line and they're like shooting, you can just like go over there and bump them, just like.
That is true. Yeah, if your opponent robot is there, you could bump them from the back. Yes.
Yeah. Or even like hit him from the side and like
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, and I just meant like from the side, but towards, not across the line. Yeah, that's what I was trying to. But yes, that is true. So yeah, there definitely is some defensive play you could do here, and some management of your feeder station that they could do up here. So if you're not able to score, those options definitely exist. I don't know if somebody wants to attempt to type out whatever that was, but that was a lot of defense / feeder management, something like that. At state champs, teams get a little bit better, but not that much better. Like they probably can score a little bit more in auto. They might be able to do a little bit more scoring a couple times, but there's probably still some value in them playing a similar role. And it probably depends on where you're drafting too, right? The 24th pick is probably very similar to the third at districts. The 19th pick or whatever it is much closer to a scoring robot. I think part of it is just how well do 3 cyclers work in this game, right?
There's such limits.
Because you're limited on who can be shooting it here, right? But how quickly can we shoot? How quickly are you able to unload all your balls?
Yeah.
Is that the long part of the cycle, or is it collecting all the balls is the long part? Because if it's collecting, then you can all just one person shoots, 2 people are collecting, next person comes in, they shoot, 2 people are collecting, and you just keep doing that, right? You can almost like run like a weird like cycle around the field. You just drive around, get balls, score, drive around. Like you could just be running laps. You could stay out of everybody's way. Like you're running into the defender paths and things. It would get really weird, but I doubt the lap strategy is the right one. You could do it.
What if what if it's that strategy, except like you like presumably when you go from your feeder to your scoring thing, that's when you like go slowly, and then on the way back you beeline, but on your opponent's side. You just boop.
See, yeah, you're just coming back and you're just racing through this side or like somewhere near the side, depending on if you have a defender. I guess if you don't have 3, you just run through your
you
opponent's
happen
side.
to collide into opponent robots.
Right.
That's not a downside.
So yeah, so at this point, so you just run a offensive, yeah, you run basically like an interference pattern through here to mess up whatever your opponents are doing. As you come back through here, you take all the balls you can from your spot. People can feed into you a little bit if your human players time it right. As you're coming through, they can dump into you. You intake. Next person clears out in front of you and shoots. Then do it again. So there's basically someone.
Yeah. And
yeah.
if there's any game pieces on their side, might want to grab those too.
Right, you snag them as you're coming through. Yeah, no, that's an interesting cycle. It's a very interesting three cyclers. Somebody's basically always shooting. Someone's over on this side. Someone's coming back. Yeah, that's interesting. That definitely plays in the hand of every robot being able to do both game pieces because you're kind of trying to intake everything while you go. I don't think any of us who designed this thought of that as a plan, but it seems solid enough. The lap cycles are actually interesting. And if you have the other team doing it, they're doing it in the same direction. Ooh, that gets weird. Oh, that's very weird. They're doing it in the same clockwise. Everybody is just driving around clockwise. You could be racing each other. We accidentally built 2008 and didn't know it.
Other clockwise.
Sorry, counterclockwise. Yes, I meant I just meant the same direction. But yes, it is counterclockwise, or just a backwards clock, whatever. Oh, that's a thing we used to have that no one remembers anymore. When we used to build in Burris's room, it's Agnes. He had a backwards clock, and it confused everyone. And then we briefly tried to add a backwards clock into our new lab, and then it never got hung properly, and then it just went away. But we all had to learn time on a backwards clock because that was the one that we all looked at in Burris's classroom. Possibly offense. Probably offense, something like that. Okay. As we're, what is my phone doing? It's freaking out. Okay, that was confusing. Okay. No, it's still deciding to. Okay, well, I figure out why my phone is thinking the volume button's hit. I'm gonna figure out question 9. So I think we talked about question 9 a little bit already, right? With the camping robots. Are there any other ways that we can just break this game or outside the box weird robot designs?
What is secret passage sniping?
This was copied directly from 2791. They're kickoff questions, which are linked down here. I think that was just grabbing the balls from the secret passage in 2016, which is back where your opponents fed them through. You could just grab them and then shoot them again. It's not anywhere close to 469 in 2010, but it is a way. So this was how do you create a closed loop scoring, I think is the most important part, right? So once you score, they have to feed the ball back in. You could grab it and then score again, and you just have that loop. The difference in 469 is that they were controlling the loop. In 2016, the other human player is feeding the ball, so they don't have control of the loop. So the only I don't think there's any crazy scoring loop. Well, yeah. So the only scoring loop directly is if you can score enough small balls to where they have to dump every time you score. You could score enough small balls. They have to dump. You could drive over, intake all the small balls, and do it again. And but it seems very easy to disrupt that in lots of ways. It's a whole amount of you're crossing the entire field. It's just widtherize, and they can put people there. And
Wait, is there like a procedure for putting the small balls into the field? Or is it just you have a bin, you have a ramp, they need to go onto the field, and you can do wacky stuff?
You're not allowed to roll them by hand. You have to dump the bin.
Yeah. But you can introduce other momentum things and forces.
According to the rules right now, yes, you could just take the bin, tip it over, and launch it if you wanted to. But the rules that could also be a team update if for some reason we think that that's going to be a problem. Right, that could be a 2013 Blizzard. Oh no, human players can't throw all the frisbees because it becomes an issue. But as long as they all enter the field, I don't really care what happens, right? But yeah, with the bin, I guess you could shake it or I don't know, run them off different walls. I guess maybe, right? You could try to dump them off this wall. Yeah, if you started over here, you could try to get more to hit this wall and then go back out towards your own people. Maybe, I don't really know. There's only so much, and we won't build one to be able to do our normal human player testing with, sadly. So we can't try to break the human player zone like we normally try to do. But
is there a way to do this with big balls?
I mean, you can just throw big balls, but
no,
they go to
you catch every possible throw.
Yeah, you could, but the thing is, though, they still go to your opponents, though, right? So then they can throw them wherever they want.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Once
yeah, exactly. They throw them wherever they want, so then you just catch them.
I mean, but they don't even have to throw them. They could roll them down. They can throw them to an opponent, to their own robot who could catch it.
I'm sorry.
This is not directly related to this, but you know how you can you know how you can roll them down yours and then you can catch them there? What if you catch them but in your scoring ramp zone?
It rolls all the way.
Oh, sorry. You don't need to. You just need to throw to where it stops in that ramp zone without hitting a wall. You didn't throw it too fast, and it just stops there.
In your scoring ramp zone.
Yeah, in your scoring ramp zone.
Yes.
Yes. And
I see what you're saying.
You could just quote unquote store them there, except you're not storing them because then you're scoring them.
Yeah, but as soon as you score, they become the other opponents now, right?
Yeah. No. It's just even if no one's there,
right?
If you just
Correct.
are good at throwing,
yes.
You just
I mean, you don't even do that. If you're just good at scoring, you can just if you're good at throwing, you can stand here and just throw it up the ramp and score it.
You could.
the human players can just score balls,
they could. Though I'm pretty sure that it's not worth it in terms of you're not making inner. And if your robot can make inner,
I mean, how good are you? How good's your human player at throwing balls?
yeah.
Right, there's definitely a path, but from this side of this human player station to roll it up the ramp and into the inner goal, that exists. How hard that is, I have no idea.
Yeah, but at that point.
But yes, I agree. There's probably a way to get it to stop somewhere over here and wait for your robot to go grab it and shoot it in the inner goal.
Yeah, it's if your opponents are scoring a lot, you might human players score them just so you can, because it's I have to throw this ball away anyway. I might as well convert it into 5 points. But if not, you could just throw it to your robot. But we also don't know how hard that is.
Yes, both of those things are true. We talked about ranking system already. It's win, loss, tie plus the ranking points. This does affect our robot goals a little bit because it incentivizes both climbing and being able to do both ball types.
Yeah.
So, because if you can only do one ball type, there's going to be some matches where you're partnered with other robots that can only do one ball type, and it may be the same ball type, especially if you only can do big ball, assuming that our every bot plan is correct.
But what do you think most that people are gonna do more small ball climb types or small ball defense?
I mean, by saying big balls are the everybot, we're assuming that more people are doing big balls than small balls,
Oh, I see.
right? Because we're saying the big ball task is the more efficient task to do. So we're assuming
Yeah.
more people, especially if we went through the actual real season and you had an everybot publish and you had all these like RE3Ds publish, you probably get more people doing big balls. But there is a place where small balls could make sense. You'll get some teams who only do small balls because like there's always teams that like counter, right? There were teams in 2017 that only shot and didn't do gears. That was incorrect, but there were teams who did it. Okay, so some of the last stuff we can talk about. Do you need more than one robot for RPs? Probably. You can probably get the goal robot if you're really fast, right? You can shoot enough balls. Climbing robot, you definitely do.
Yeah.
You need at least, what do you end up needing? You need 3 high parks or a climb in a high park, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, for ranking? Yeah, it's 90. One high, one climb.
So
I feel like there is a way for you to
solo the climb?
Well,
solo the climb RP?
Yeah, solo the climb RP.
There definitely is.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm gonna go with definitely in the same way that you can in 2020.
It gets really weird with the bumper zone.
Yeah.
Real weird. You can't have anything below your bumper. Like nothing can be like wherever the top of the bottom plane of your bumper is. The bumpers have to be within 7 inches, so nothing can ever be below 2.5 inches below that plane of your bumpers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
That makes it really hard. Like I'm not saying it's impossible. I just haven't thought of a way to do it yet.
Well, one, you don't actually need to like lift them at all. You just need to like hold them, literally in any spot. You grab onto one part of their robot.
Right. But then you have to like you've had to have flipped yourself in some weird way, which I think has to be with like your wheels facing the goal.
Yeah.
Then you can do a lot. Wait, once your wheels face your goal, you can do a lot.
Yeah.
1323, 125.
Yeah, like some weird flat out, your wheels face the goal, and then you can do whatever you want coming back 4 feet. Well, 4 feet down and 6 feet forward, yeah. Correct. It is a super weird thing to build, though, but it's possible. But you only get the high park, you won't get the double climb, correct. So it becomes less incentive, too, because you're losing. So the amount of time it takes and everything, like it's only to get the RP.
Yeah, but
which
like,
I think
like
the
that's
easier
the thing of
RP
value.
plan is shove someone up one of them and get them stuck, drive to the other one and climb, and you've done.
Yeah, this also depends on it also depends on what kind of climb you're gonna do, because you could do the I'm pivoting on a bar, a low bar, and then in that way it's a little easier to just like grab someone.
No, because again, if anything's below your wheels that you have, it doesn't work.
No. Your wheels are like facing the ceiling / the goal.
How are they facing the ceiling though? Aren't they facing away from the goal when you curl that way? How are you curling the other way? What?
This is true. You can't curl that way.
Yeah, like how in the world are you curling the other way?
You're driving it upside down.
Yeah, like you can put your wheels like on. You could like put your wheels facing up and this way, so then you have a little bit more room. And maybe there's like a thing that is down here that like grabs a robot somehow. That seems crazy too. There is some path for that.
You just build your bumpers really low so you can extend.
What?
You just build your bumpers really low so you can extend. You just move your bumper zone.
So you can extend. No, you still can extend max 2.5 inches below your bumpers.
2.5 inches, good enough.
I don't think that is good enough. I think you've got out. Okay. So yes, so there is probably some way to do it, but it's probably not worth it because back to our, even if we had infinite recharge again, right? We now understand the idea that if we don't plan to use the mechanism in elims, we probably shouldn't build the mechanism. I know that's at least where we basically got to at some point once we realized we should have not built the buddy climb. Because it just loses its value so quickly that if you don't get it working very fast, it no longer has value. Which is what happened to us, right? We probably could have got the buddy climb working, but it would have been at a point where it no longer mattered. And we were just like, we went through all this stuff where we were like, oh, maybe it matters for certain qual matches at champs, but that ends up not being a real thing, and you're just not tuning it. And it's wasted effort to try to actually win the event because now you're tuning for all this stuff to get the 1 seed and not to actually be the best robot. Saying all that, I could easily see us getting some game where we argue the other way again, and then we still try to do something, but whatever. Okay, yeah, so we talked about RPs. Kind of the last question for the entire group is what is important to scout? Kind of what do we think our metrics are? Scouting in this game would be crazy. I don't even want to scout this. We definitely built a game that you could just almost not scout, right? As hard as it was to scout the inner goal this year, which we basically we didn't do, scouting any goal in this game would be insanity.
I mean, it'd basically be impossible, but the amount of balls they can intake, that'd be important.
Yeah, because like 2017, we didn't have a good way to scout how many balls people shot. It was lucky that, or how many balls people made. It was lucky that basically almost most matches only one robot made balls, so you just like counted all of the made balls as that robot. It was very convenient. Less so in this game.
I think it depends on how many people are able to score small balls.
Right. So I think you're definitely scouting big balls pretty easily, and you can at least get inner ring, outer probably relatively easily, like rings or outer goal or lower goal. Sorry. Small balls, it becomes interesting if you have a bunch of people all shooting smalls at the same time. You have no way to keep track.
You could also just not scout it.
Cycles.
That's what my guess is. You just don't scout small balls probably at all,
you don't,
and you
don't
just
scout
use
small balls.
you just use the component OPR of small balls. Like the system scores it enough, and you just have some idea.
You could just have someone like jot down whenever someone does score any amount of small balls at all.
So I think there's way more small balls
but...
scored than you do, especially at like champs.
Oh yeah, at champs.
Right. Districts, it's whatever, because I don't think I don't know if they determine anything, right? Or you already know the best robots are going to be doing it anyway, and like they'll be good enough at it that it's not turning the tides.
Maybe.
Like, I mean, if they're already doing it, they're good at everything, right? Like they're the small balls isn't the thing that are going to like turn the tide for them probably at district level, unless you get like unless there is an extreme small ball only shooter that is just absolutely great at it. But that's unlikely, and we would know.
I mean, if that happens, you'll also know, right?
Right, and we would be able to figure out roughly how many points they're scoring per match because of it and things. It's the fact that a few small balls here or there doesn't change anything, so there's no reason to try to scout individual ones because you don't really care. If somebody scores 4 in a match, whatever. If someone scores, 90 in a match, you want to know, but you'll know that basically. You can have somebody figuring that out. Climb is definitely important. If they're high parking, low parking, climbing. Maybe you don't care if they're low parking, but high parking and climbing is important.
Fencer note? Just like a nice thing to know.
What, low park? I don't know what you said. Okay, you're like, I think you were cutting out. You said it would seem like a nice thing to know, but then you didn't say anything, so I was confused. Okay, fully fine. All right, I don't know what's going on. I'm very confused. Yeah, some form of climb, big balls for sure. Some way to count small balls, but it's probably not individual because that'd be really hard. Auton, how many you shoot in Auton is probably important, like how many you actually can get off the line and get into the goal.
frozen for a while.
Yeah,
And
we
it was
all
just, like,
the entire Zoom just like freaked out.
but like me, Sunny, and Janet were just chilling. Everyone else is dying. And we were
I
just,
could
like,
What
I
just
could hear all
happened?
of y'all though.
Oh,
I
you're
couldn't hear
just-
any. I heard the last thing I heard was Felipe say something about like it seems like a good thing to know, and that was the last thing I heard. And then I was very
And then
confused
Ethan
why
died.
no one.
Yeah, I saw you like moving your arms, and I was like, "Is he talking?"
That was weird. Why is that where it happened? Okay, that was very strange. It seems to kept the recording going somehow, so
Dang.
that's fun. I don't know, cause I definitely like fully like left and came back. Like it like
Yeah.
crashed everything and like loaded me
Yeah,
back in.
no,
Okay, I don't know what happened to Ethan. Ethan's just gone now.
yeah, he's back.
Ethan's just peace. Okay. So while we're at that stage, the last few things we don't need to do right now, but they're just more. I don't know how to do this yet. So this is one of the thought. The thought was basically to have people. We might have like I might do it through Classroom in the future where everyone has their own like. I don't want to say like notebook or like just like a notes area. Because one of the things I like our public notes area, but I feel like a lot of people aren't willing to put stuff in it. Even though it's like no one's name's attached to it or anything, but whatever. But I do want to have like more ideas of what people think elite robots are going to look like, what people think our robot's going to look like, and what people think our robot should look like, which are all three very different questions. They could all have the same answer. Sometimes they will. Other times they'll have three very distinct answers.
Well, I think for this game, there's only so many robots you can make that are actually.
No, there are infinite robots you can make in this game. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? What?
Right?
There's so many robots you can make in this game. I don't think. Okay, so we haven't gotten to like craziness yet. So we haven't really like just thrown stuff out there. But we've sat. Kathleen and several of us have sat kind of with this game for like what 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
We kind of got the original idea. So we've had this for a while. It might have been more than that. It might be like almost a month. But yeah, so one of the things we haven't discussed is we alluded to, but haven't just straight up discussed. So for small balls, everything has to be below 18 inches, but you're allowed to expand. So you can start at 120 inch frame perimeter, but you can extend 15 inches everywhere, and you can expand your small ball capacity around your bumpers or over your bumpers and out,
Oh my
and have
God.
like add 30 inches of width to your small ball capacity. I don't know how you deal with this. I don't know how it works. I don't know, but that's very much within the rules.
You mean kind of
Oh my
like
God.
you mean like a vacuum bag where it's sort of pleated, and then as you expand it, like opens.
No, I
up
don't
like
even
a
think it has. It doesn't have to
pop
be.
thing?
That's more complicated than you have to get. You can just fold it out at the beginning, right? Because the
Okay.
mechanism itself can be bigger, just the balls can't be. So you can just start kind of fold it in and just fold out these ramps or whatever that hold more balls. Yeah.
Wait, so there's no limit to the size of the robot?
18. What?
15
18
inches. 15 inches past the frame perimeter.
Oh,
But you have 15
geez.
inches past the frame perimeter on all sides.
Oh my.
Right? So you could go 15 inches out the back and 15 inches out the sides. If you wanted to hold a lot of balls, you could hold a lot of balls.
Yeah.
In theory, around the bumpers if you really wanted to, but that's just really hard because you have to bring them back over the bumpers. So it's more likely like over the bumpers makes more sense. Like if you just like ramp it. And then there's also like these really weird ideas of how do you get stuff out of below 18 inches if you want to hold like as much ball as possible. Like do you like move your gearboxes like above 18 inches? Do you move your battery? Like everything you normally would put below 18 inches and just have like a giant empty box with like some wheels down there?
The entire belly pan is an elevator.
No, it's not an elevator. It just starts up there.
Oh, that's even
Everything
weirder.
below is just empty space for balls.
Could you shoot from the high park position?
Absolutely.
So you like go high and then you play like figure out the angle to your like perfect shot every time, just like yeet.
Absolutely, you can do that. Anytime during the match, you can just drive up and figure out how to. I actually think the ball somewhat gets harder to shoot that. Like it gets very weird.
Yeah. Angle.
But potentially you could stick a decent amount of your robot up here and then like fire in like this way. I don't know how that would work, but there's no rule that says you can't bring a lot of your robot into the zone currently. I think there would be some weirdness of like you getting stuck in your own goal. Like that's a thing that could happen. Like there's a lot of risk involved there, right? You're also blocking it from everyone else on your alliance from scoring at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, you could like drive up and then have like a small ball shooter that just like guns top goals. There's like some crazy robot that like expands out. It holds like 100 something small balls. It drives up, latches onto here, and just guns them all into this thing, and you get like 400 points in like a single crazy cycle. That is an option of a robot that could be built. Whether that robot makes any sense to build, I have no idea. Plus, you have this weirdness of like, how do you even get all the balls moving towards the thing because you're not like gravity's working against you, right? So like your balls aren't going towards your shooter. You have to somehow like push them all towards the shooter without gravity as easily, because gravity's kind of pulling them all away from the shooter. It's a really hard, it's a crazy challenge. Like I hope someone would build something like this. Again, sadly we won't see 4,000 teams build robots for this, but my guess is that robot doesn't win a world title. Like I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying I doubt it does. But crazy parking robot, and like you could also like have a intake on the back so then people can shoot balls at you, so once you're parked you just stay there forever.
Yeah.
Like you just go around, collect as many balls as you can, get up and park, and then you just park there and just shoot, and that's your goal, is just you just forever. I would not be surprised if someone tried that if this was a real game. It seems a little crazy, but it's probably something someone would do.
There's definitely somebody out there that would.
Oh. Okay. We are hitting 7, which was my guess at when this would start wrapping up. Anyone have any other like things they want to talk about? Everyone's just happy. We're good.
Yeah.
I think I like how we're still learning things about this game though. There were definitely multiple things that I like. The fact that small balls count to the ranking point, even if you miss, I never even crossed my mind until today. Didn't have any thought that that was a thing. And they're like, oh, we did not. Interesting. We wrote a cool rule that we didn't know about. Okay, yes.
RP is really easy.
The RP is really easy.
Oh wait, also, or I feel like it's definitely easier than the other ones. I forgot about the whole 12 big balls thing.
Yeah, we definitely we let it be. We wanted to get it in the range of a single robot doing it, but we wanted to make it hard.
Yeah.
And that does count auto though. So like if you have a 3 to 4 ball auto, maybe a 5 ball auto. 5 ball seems really hard, but maybe. If you had a 5 ball auto, then the big ball thing gets really close. But that's like an elite auto. I don't think people are doing much more than 5, but maybe. But yeah, we intentionally didn't make the quarter pipe goal ranking point too difficult.
I mean, 2 teams could easily do these.
Correct.
All 3 ranking points.
Correct. That is intentional.
Yeah.
We wanted to go the other way from this season where neither ranking point happened. Or sorry, the one ranking point like never happened, right? The control panel ranking point. Like it would have started to get easier, but for our design purposes, we wanted just to encourage both balls, but allow teams to try to do the whole thing, the whole ranking point by themselves. Okay, so I'm getting tired, or more just tired of talking. It's a long time to run a stream. Okay, so the things that we should be thinking about going into Friday, and I mean we'll probably be talking about this like come 3 o'clock most days from now on, like until whenever. We'll probably be discussing things that go into this. But Friday we'll do some CAD for like solving some of the problems. So part of it is like coming up with kind of robot concepts, either sketching them in SolidWorks or whatever, drawing them on your computer, drawing them by hand, thinking about what we want the robots to do. We didn't really rank stuff here or do anything like that. I don't think we need to for what the purpose of this. I don't think we have to make the choice of not doing small balls. I think we're going to CAD a robot that shoots small balls because it's a virtual CAD challenge. So like the choice would exist in real life, and I think there's a way to be like a really good only big ball robot that could exist. But it doesn't make any sense for us to do that, so we don't have to like have that design decision. So I guess last things are we have to start figuring out steward stuff, right? So we have drivetrain, climber, intake, small ball sorting and launcher, big ball sorting and launcher.
Yeah, that
Probably.
makes sense.
I'm assuming intake is a single intake because otherwise it gets really awkward if you have like big ball intake on one side and small ball on the other.
Could we somehow make one launcher?
I don't think you want to.
Or I don't even know what a launcher would look like because you have to roll it.
So it's just like inverted, right? It's basically just a shooter wheel except the wheel's on top.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
Right, because then the wheel's spinning this way, so then when the ball comes out, it's spinning this way.
Yeah. Okay.
Along the floor. The trickiest part is like the actual trickiest part isn't the intaking or launching probably. It's almost certainly the small ball sorting. There's also some decision points that we hadn't talked about at all is for small balls, do you shoot a single stream or do you shoot a double stream? Like 2017, the answer was definitely double stream or like at least 1.5 stream. But if you're trying to shoot like the top goal, it becomes really hard. Like we didn't discuss whether top goal is important or not. That was another thing we could discuss. Because that gets tricky, but potentially. Like the top goal could dramatically change the game if somebody gets really good at it. Like just dramatically change the game. Because like we didn't even look at that in the scoring sheet. Like if you make this up to like something like 70% and everything else are misses, it's still a lot of points.
Yeah.
like if you can hit like a 70% top goal rate, you are just dropping things. Like that's only 100. That's 120. It's 100 balls in that top goal is 280 points. But that top, like hitting 70% of that top goal seems crazy, but maybe it's doable. I don't know. Again, this is definitely playing in this sheet and trying to figure out what makes sense to do is reasonable. Because you can also only single stream the top goal, where you could possibly double stream even the inner goal.
I mean, if you're making that much into the top goal, I'm gonna assume you're gonna be holding more than 20 balls a cycle. Also.
Probably yes. Because yeah, once you're like. Because even if you did like 4 cycles of 50, you're just like,
yeah. Oh my god.
You're just.
Oh shit.
That's 4 cycles of 50 small balls, 70% into the top goal. Yeah, it gets real weird at the top goal levels. If you could actually make the top goal just perfect shooter robot, which potentially is relatively easy. We designed the goal, so we can put some of like how we designed the goal. What is this? Where's normal to? So the oh, you can't actually see the goal from here. Well, that's confusing. Somewhere there's a sketch, but basically, if you can perfectly accurately be centered and launch a ball at full speed up this ramp, perfect centered, aim at this thing, it should go in. Like you shouldn't have to cap your speed. Like if you just shoot it straight, if you can shoot it straight, but you have to be perfectly accurate, right? You have to basically be lined up centered, and you have to be like dead center. The ball has to keep going dead center, and you have to put it up at like a really fast speed, and like nothing weird has to happen with the ramp. like all of that, it should go straight in. The design was basically there was no cap to the speed. So these goals are a velocity challenge to get it into a window, right? You have to be above a certain speed and below a certain speed for the big balls and the small balls to go in here. This goal, you only had to be above a certain speed, but you had to be incredibly accurate, was the challenge. And we didn't prototype to do any of this, so we don't actually know that. Normally, we would learn that from prototyping, but that's the rough idea there. Is velocity shouldn't matter, but accuracy matters a ton.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But being straight on and everything going perfectly is like so sim.
Maybe, but you could like potentially sit somewhere in here, line up to your vision target. Like if you were like swerve or something weird, you could like slide over and like it is possible. But it would take a lot of work, and you're banking on that working really hard. And I think that's where you would have the robot that like only does small balls if they could do something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically, like if you start
Yeah,
missing, you could just like. Oh, sorry, you can go.
No, you go, Felipe. What?
Oh, I was just saying, like theoretically, even if you're missing a lot of your shots in the top goal, you can just down the power and you'll still make it an outer/inner.
That is true. Yeah, you could.
So like going for top goal, there's no like downside.
Well, once you're going for top goal though, once that ball is released, it's probably going to be 0 points if you miss, right? Like
yeah.
It probably hits
like,
off here. It hits
top.
off the side. It hits in here somewhere, and it probably doesn't go down. There's some weird bouncing around where like you hit the side on accident, it hits the top, it hits this thing, and it goes in still. Like there's some like weird like, oh no.
Which is like possible almost.
Yeah, I have no idea what sort of pinball would happen inside of this if you just like get a ball bouncing off all the walls at really high velocity.
That's why if you go for top goal, it's most likely either you make it or you miss.
That's what our thought is, yeah.
But like designing for top goal doesn't really have a big downside. I don't think.
With small balls in general, if you can fit a lot of them, if you can get 50 per cycle, and even if you're only doing 4 cycles, even into the outer inner, you're still 320.
Yeah.
Well, like so the biggest problem with it's a time thing with the top goal, right? So like how long is it going to take you to aim? How long is it going to take you to do all these things, right? Could you potentially get a whole extra cycle by doing inner outer, and now you're pretty close to that top goal points, and it seems easier to do, and you could potentially do it faster, right? This game has so many points. And small balls outclass big balls really fast if you can do it well. Like it seems harder, but if you can do it, I think you are right, Sonny. Like small balls can be just a way better object if you can do it faster. Also, I have 300%. Oh, that's a bunch of misses. Okay.
It's not 0, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what just happened? I have way too many.
It's just so hard to get it that consistent. That many balls.
Yeah, it depends on it. Would take like how like the spacing of the balls to make sure they're not hitting each other, and that they're coming out in very straight lines, and like you're just like lined up right at the front. And you're just.
There was one team that did that one year. Was it 118 back in what was that? 2017, 2018?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of teams that did it in 17, right? Like there were you could do it. Yeah, I mean, we watched the 118 video earlier. So like, those are definitely the places to have like an example from. But yeah, that's one of the bigger choices I think all the elite robots would have to make is kind of that. Is it 2 wide small ball shooter or 1 wide, or could you like turn off one, fire them all into the top goal, turn on the other, fire them all into the top goal? Like, could you individually or other times do double? Like that seems like you're getting harder to do something like that. What are the other things? Yeah, figuring out what our climb stuff is. Okay, but the most important thing is when do you think we can do the subsystem manager lottery? Like, do we need to talk about this more? Like, do we want to do it after Friday when we do some of the CAD stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Does
can
that make
I
sense?
will have a general idea of what each subsystem is.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I think pushing it further makes sense. I agree. I was just making sure. Okay. Anything else before we end for tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay. I think we went through most stuff. You guys all have your own individual note documents. Feel free to take notes in there or put stuff in here too. Like the public one is fine to copy and paste stuff into if you think it's useful. I think we did pretty good for a kickoff. It only took, what, we took like almost 4 hours, like three, a little over three,
Yeah.
whatever it is, 3.5. Considering real kickoff is like 9, I think we did. I think we did all right. Not even real kickoffs. Oh god, real kickoffs like 14. Like, what am I talking about? Oh, real kickoff so long. Okay, cool. At some point we have to like decide when the actual manual is finished so we can publish it, but I don't think that needs to be until like after this weekend. If we had to, like, we can do it later. Okay. I think that's it.
Okay.
Okay.